Chapter 51-62. Who said I'm going to escape? Yixian sneered and suddenly waved his hand. His divine sense voice was filled with endless disdain. It's a rare occasion for all the fellow Taoists to gather here today. I want to take this opportunity to break through to the supreme primordial chaos after the heavenly Tao. Whoosh! Walala! As soon as he finished speaking, Yixian immediately made his move. A ray of light shot out. It was incomparably dazzling. As it expanded in the wind, the sound of waves of flames could be heard. This 10-colored ray of light turned into a gorgeous 10-colored sea of flames. And in half a breath, it expanded and shrank, turning into a gigantic 10-colored fireball with a diameter of 100 million kilometers. Yixian, who was in the form of a violent bear, was completely enveloped and disappeared. All of this had been prepared by Yixian. He had long expected that the appearance of the level 31 primordial chaos pill would definitely attract the primordial chaos pill tribulation. The terrifying power of the primordial chaos pill tribulation would definitely attract the heavenly Tao's old monsters and the 13 old monsters of primordial chaos from the left bank. Once the old monsters of primordial chaos arrived, he would no longer be able to escape. Even the interstellar coordinate jump ability of the system in his body would not be activated again. Even if the number of heavenly Tao old monsters increased to more than 100, they would still be able to cause complete chaos in the void, causing Yixian to lose the chance to activate the interstellar coordinate jump ability that was attached to the system in his body and escape. So, Yixian didn't have the chance to activate the interstellar coordinate jump ability within his body. Therefore, after deriving the perfect pill formula of the level 31 primordial chaos pill, even if Yixian had already gathered all the ingredients needed to refine a primordial chaos pill, he had not started refining it. While he was constantly searching for the top 10 beasts on the heavenly Tao's ferocious beast list on the left bank and fighting with these powerful ferocious beast old monsters. He used this method to seek opportunities to break through as soon as possible. Straight now that his cultivation had finally reached the pinnacle of the heavenly Tao realm, he could consume a grade 31 primordial chaos pellet and break through to the primordial chaos Tao realm. Only then did he begin to refine the primordial chaos pellet. Now, the appearance of the primordial pill was just as Yixian had guessed. It had attracted a large number of heavenly Tao old monsters, including the primordial chaos old monsters who came after the heavenly Tao. The nether wolf had only arrived first. The other 12 primordial chaos old monsters would arrive one after another. However, in the face of such a situation, even if he no longer had the opportunity to successfully break out of the encirclement, Yixian was not anxious at all. Here, when he summoned the 10-colored flames, it turned into a sea of flames and formed a fireball that enveloped himself. In fact, it was a form of protection. Although Yixian was trapped here and could not leave, with the 10-colored flames, the heavenly Tao old monsters and primordial chaos old monsters outside could not do anything to him. They could only surround him heavily. Yixian, who was inside the 10-colored flames, would immediately consume a level 31 primordial chaos pellet under the protection of the fireball and break through to the primordial chaos realm after the heavenly Tao realm. Once he successfully broke through, he would become a supreme existence of the great Tao realm. Even if he removed the 10-colored flames that protected him, he would no longer have to fear. No, yes, Yixian was well aware of all this, but the various heavenly Tao old monsters in the void outside the 10-colored flames, including the primordial chaos old turtle, the heaven-suppressing sacred ape, and the nether wolf, were all kept in the dark. At this moment, when they heard Yixian say such grand words that he had just refined the primordial chaos pellet, he was actually going to break through in public and break through to the primordial chaos Tao realm after the heavenly Tao realm, and he had even summoned the 10-colored flames that was a legendary existence even in the endless years of the primordial era. The old monsters of the heavenly Tao were stunned at first, but then their bodies trembled violently. Their expressions changed drastically as they sucked in cold breaths. Cries of shock that were like a tide instantly resounded in the sky and earth, filling the entire vast void. Heavens, the nether wolf is actually in such a sorry state, almost to the point of being heavily injured. This is a primordial chaos old monster after the heavenly Tao, a supreme existence of the great Tao realm. He was actually caught off guard and injured by the violent bear. This is truly heaven-defying. Breaking through to the primordial chaos realm? This violent bear has such big words, He actually wants to break through to the primordial chaos Tao realm in public. Wasn't the primordial chaos pellet he just refined already destroyed? Furthermore, even with such a heaven-defying treasure pill, it would take at least 100 years to successfully break through. Where did he get the confidence to break through in public? 10 colored flames? Hiss. This is the legendary top-notch flame. Even the Shinong 9 colored flames is far inferior to it, and it actually appeared. Where did this violent bear come from? He actually has such a strange flame in his hand, but he has always been unknown. This is simply impossible. Too strange. This venerable one has a bad feeling, as if everything that happened today had already been planned. From the beginning to the end, this violent bear did not panic in the slightest. Could it be that everything was within his expectations or even control? If that's really the case, then it's too terrifying. At the very least, it means that he has a certain degree of confidence in successfully breaking through. Heavens, this is too shocking. What a familiar feeling, as though I've seen it before. Furthermore, the 10 colored flames are too stunning. I have a bold guess. Could it be formed from the fusion of the Shinong 9 colored flames and the Red Lotus karmic fire? Are you saying that this violent bear is actually the magic hall's owner, Yi Xian? Heavens, we actually forgot about him. Although the possibility isn't high, it's definitely not impossible. If the violent bear is really the magic hall's owner, Yi Xian in disguise, how did he return from the primordial chaos turbulence? A heavenly Tao realm expert shouldn't have such means. Roar! Screech! Screech! Along with the earth-shattering cries of astonishment, the abyss wolf, who had suddenly fallen into a daze, finally regained his senses. He raised his head and let out a vicious howl. The killing intent in his body had reached its peak at this moment. 10 colored flames? It's actually 10 colored flames. Darn it, it must be you. You actually returned from the primordial chaos turbulence. As a peak heavenly Tao realm expert who had reached the great circle of the 9th step millions of years ago, he naturally knew how terrifying the 10 colored flames were. Even a great Tao expert at the primordial chaos realm wouldn't dare touch it lightly. In other words, he could only watch as the suspected magic hall's owner, Yi Xian, roamed freely under the protection of the 10 colored flames. However, he was completely helpless and could do nothing. At the same time, inside the 10 colored flames, Yi Xian immediately returned to his human form. With a wave of his hand, he brought out the Shinong treasured cauldron. With a flash, he appeared at the cauldron's mouth, which was shrouded in 9-colored fog. He sat down cross-legged. Phew! Phew! This breakthrough was a decision he made after careful consideration. Therefore, there was no reason for him to hesitate. With a wave of his hand, the sound of something tearing through the air could be heard. Streaks of light shot out. They were all resources he retrieved from the undying world in his body. He was going to use them for this breakthrough. Not only were there 10 heavenly Tao blood essences, they were all top-grade items. The most important resource was a level 31 primordial chaos pill. In order to ensure success, Yi Xian had invested a lot in this breakthrough. He couldn't fail. He had to succeed. Inside the 10 colored flames, the Shinong treasured cauldron floated in the center. Yi Xian, who had returned to his human form, sat cross-legged at the mouth of the cauldron, which was shrouded in 9-colored fog. In front of him floated a large amount of top-grade cultivation resources, including a level 31 primordial chaos pill. These resources were all prepared for this closed-door cultivation to break through to the great Tao realm. After everything was ready, Yi Xian's eyes flashed. The power of the cauldron's domain was activated. All the cultivation resources were compressed to the size of a nascent soul fist and swallowed into his stomach. Then, some of the cultivation resources melted in Yi Xian's mouth. A majestic river of energy quickly flowed through Yi Xian's body. The expected sound of chains rattling could be heard. There was only one shackle this time. However, it was much thicker than before. It was almost as thick as the spine of Yi Xian's physical body. After all, he was going to break through to the primordial chaos Tao realm after the heavenly Tao realm. It was only natural that such a thick shackle would appear in his body. However, Yi Xian didn't take it to heart. No matter how thick it was just a shackle. As long as he could tear it apart, he would be able to break through successfully. From then on, his cultivation would break through to the heavenly Tao realm and enter the primordial chaos realm after the heavenly Tao realm. From then on, he would become a supreme existence at the great Tao realm. He quickly calmed himself down and threw away all the distracting thoughts in his mind. Closing his eyes, he immediately activated the huge river of energy that had just formed in his body. It began to circulate in the hundreds of meridians in his body over and over again. This time, other than the chaos medicine and other top-grade cultivation resources that were usually used for breaking through, Yi Xian not only swallowed 10 supreme-grade heavenly Tao blood essences, but he also swallowed a level 31 primordial chaos pill. In addition, the breakthrough this time was to break through to the primordial chaos Tao realm after the heavenly Tao realm. The shackles in his body were extremely thick. Therefore, as the large circulation started, Yi Xian's meridians, limbs, and bones instantly felt an intense pain. It was so intense that even he almost couldn't bear it. However, he gritted his teeth and forced himself to endure it. Gradually, the beads of cold sweat on Yi Xian's forehead disappeared. His tightly knitted brows also slowly relaxed. He forgot about the pain and gradually entered a good state. Then, as time passed, he sat cross-legged at the mouth of the Shinong treasured cauldron. His body glowed with endless light. He had completely forgotten about everything else and had completely lost consciousness of time. After an unknown amount of time, the great river of energy formed in the meridians in his body was finally completely refined. After that, with just one strike of the accumulated energy, the incomparably thick shackles broke with a sound. At this moment, the anticipated system notification sounded in Yi Xian's mind. Ding! Congratulations to the host for breaking through to the ancient Dongshu technique. Current realm. Level 1 of the primordial chaos. Ding! Congratulations to the host for breaking through to the ancient Dongshu technique. Current realm. Level 1 of the primordial chaos. Level 1 of the primordial chaos. He had finally broken through to the heavenly Tao realm and stepped into the primordial chaos Tao realm after the heavenly Tao realm. This was the highest level of cultivation in the primordial chaos void. Even the 3,000 chaos demon gods that were born at the beginning of each primordial chaos era were only at this level of cultivation. Also, in other words, the current Yi Xian was already standing on the same level as the chaos demon gods. Of course, even in the primordial chaos realm, there were strong and weak. He had just broken through, and his cultivation was at level 1 of the primordial chaos Tao realm, the weakest existence in the primordial chaos Tao realm. This matter in fact, among the chaos demon gods, even if they were at the peak of the primordial chaos great Tao realm, there were strong and weak existences. This was related to the power of the primordial chaos law that they controlled. Dang! However, the peak of the primordial chaos great Tao realm was still too far away from the current Yi Xian. He had just entered this realm and was only at level 1 of the primordial chaos great Tao realm. However, he still had the bloodline ability of the 9 devil ape transformation. After activating it, his cultivation level would increase by a small level. After that, each transformation would increase his cultivation level by 1 level. Also, this meant that after the breakthrough, although Yi Xian's cultivation level was still at level 1 of the primordial chaos great Tao realm, after activating the bloodline ability of the 9 devil ape transformation, his cultivation level would instantly reach level 2 of the primordial chaos great Tao realm. If he were to use the bloodline ability of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape to the first transformation, his cultivation would increase by another level, reaching the 3rd level of the Grand Mist realm. At this rate, when he reached the 7th transformation, Yi Xian's cultivation would reach the peak of the 9th level of the Grand Mist realm. However, this should be the end. After the primordial chaos great Tao realm, there was still the supreme chaos great Tao realm. The 8th transformation would most likely be suppressed by the chaos great Tao realm, including the 9th transformation. No, it didn't matter. The primordial chaos great Tao realm was the highest cultivation level in the primordial chaos great Tao realm. In the entire primordial chaos great Tao realm, not a single chaos great Tao realm expert had been born in the primordial chaos great Tao realm for countless years. As long as Yi Xian was able to reach the peak of the great Tao of the 9th step of the Grand Mist realm, he would be able to run amok in this vast and boundless Grand Mist void. He would be able to sweep through everything without any fear. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Yi Xian, who was sitting cross-legged at the mouth of the Shinong treasured cauldron, suddenly opened his eyes. At this moment, although he had not activated the bloodline ability of the Nine Devil Ape transformation in his body, he already had a very strong intuition. The suppression of the great Tao that had always existed had completely disappeared as his cultivation level officially broke through to the primordial chaos great Tao realm. And moreover, perhaps it was because he had already broken through the heavenly Tao realm and entered the primordial chaos great Tao realm after the heavenly Tao realm, but he could clearly feel that the primordial chaos great Tao realm outside the treasured cauldron was surging into his body. It was slowly but continuously changing his physical body, and even his soul sea was undergoing a transformation and sublimation. Feeling the transformation of his soul sea and physical body, Yi Xian was enlightened. He understood that he could not activate the bloodline ability of the Nine Devil Ape transformation because he had just entered the primordial chaos great Tao realm. The primordial chaos great Tao realm outside the treasured cauldron was still changing his soul sea and physical body. This process was slow and long, and it was far from over. The strength of his physical body was only comparable to his actual cultivation level, which was the primordial chaos great Tao realm. If he forcefully activated the bloodline ability of the Nine Devil Ape transformation, his physical body would not be strong enough. Even if Yi Xian could display the strength of a primordial chaos great Tao realm level 2, he would not be able to maintain it for long. Moreover, it was very likely that it would affect his body to a certain extent because his physical body could not withstand this level of strength. Only just the activation of the Nine Devil Ape transformation's bloodline ability was already like this. If this bloodline ability was activated to the first transformation, the second transformation, or even higher levels, the situation would obviously be even more obvious. Upon realizing this, Yi Xian frowned and murmured worriedly, "It seems that activating the Nine Devil Ape transformation's bloodline ability will take some time. This is going to be troublesome." At the same time, outside the 10-colored fireball, as he successfully broke through and entered the primordial realm, becoming a supreme existence at the level of the great Tao, the heavenly Tao old monsters and the primordial chaos old monsters who gathered in the void around him also completely exploded in an instant. The primordial chaos Tao realm was no small matter. Even Hong Ke, the ancestor of the remnant people from 1,000,000 years ago, had created the Nine Heavens Great Tao elixir, which allowed the two sides of the Milky Way to finally have the only supreme cultivation resource that was helpful for stepping into the primordial chaos Tao realm. However, even if there was enough Nine Heavens Great Tao elixir to consume, the peak of the heavenly Tao realm at the peak of the heavenly Tao realm would easily require millions of years to break through to the primordial chaos Tao realm after the heavenly Tao realm. The level 31 primordial chaos elixir refined by Yi Xian was clearly far more helpful in breaking through to the primordial chaos Tao realm than the Nine Heavens Great Tao elixir that Hong Ke had created back then. In particular, the primordial chaos elixir that Yi Xian swallowed this time was an item that had undergone the baptism of the primordial chaos elixir tribulation. It could be said to be the best of the best, and its medicinal effects were even more prominent. Even so, after swallowing this primordial chaos elixir and going into seclusion in the 10-colored fireball, Yi Xian still spent nearly 2 years to break through to the primordial chaos Tao realm after the heavenly Tao realm. To break through the bottleneck of a major realm and spend 2 years in seclusion, this was indeed a little surprising to Yi Xian. He originally thought that he would be able to smoothly break through in about a year and come out of seclusion. However, to the various old monsters on the left bank of the Milky Way, the Nether Wolf, and the other old monsters of primordial chaos after the heavenly Tao, this short 2 years was completely negligible. Compared to the 1,000,000 years after consuming the Nine Heavens Great Tao elixir, it was simply too fast. Over the years, there had been more and more old monsters gathered around this void. When Yi Xian took out the 10-colored flames and turned them into a fireball to protect himself, only the Nether Wolf of the 13 old monsters of primordial chaos from the left bank of the Milky Way arrived. However, later on, the other 12 old monsters of primordial chaos arrived one after another, including the black-blooded blue crocodile that Yi Xian had met before. These 13 old monsters of primordial chaos stood guard in the void hundreds of billions of miles away from the 10-colored fireball. Each of them occupied a corner. This was the inner encirclement. Outside the outer encirclement was around 500 billion miles away from the 10-colored fireball in the void. Surrounding them were the old monsters of heavenly Tao from the various forbidden grounds of the ferocious beasts and the remnants of the heavenly Tao. There were both heavenly Tao ferocious beasts and remnants of the heavenly Tao. There were already more than 1,000 of them. Among them were the old turtle of primordial chaos and the sacred ape of primordial chaos, who had sworn brotherhood with Yi Xian not long ago. They were famous existences among the more than 1,000 old monsters of heavenly Tao. However, when faced with the nether wolf, the black-blooded blue crocodile, and the other old monsters of primordial chaos, they could only retreat to the second encirclement 500 billion miles away. In fact, other than the old monsters of heavenly Tao, there were also a large number of mighty figures and desolate venerables in the void a trillion miles away. They did not have the qualifications to participate in this matter at all. They could only watch from afar in the void a trillion miles away. Over the past 2 years, although the old monsters of heavenly Tao who were in the second encirclement 500 billion miles away did not have the qualifications or opportunity to make a move, the 13 old monsters of primordial chaos who were in the inner encirclement only a trillion miles away from the 10-colored fireball had all made a move without exception. However, the power of the 10-colored flame was too shocking. Just the Shenong 9-colored flame was enough to make all the old monsters of the heavenly Tao fear it. After reaching the level of the 10-colored flame, even the old monsters of the heavenly Tao would not dare to touch it lightly. Therefore, even though the 13 old monsters of primordial chaos had all tried to attack the 10-colored fireball, wanting to destroy it and capture Yi Xian who was protected by the fireball, they only used various long-range attacks from 100 billion miles away. They did not dare to directly approach and face the 10-colored fireball head-on. Although this long-range energy attack was extremely terrifying because it came from the hands of the old monsters of primordial chaos, it could only make the 10-colored fireball's flame wall shake violently. In fact, over the past 2 years, although the 10-colored fireball's flame wall shook violently from time to time, under the protection of the Shenong Cauldron's domain, the 10-colored fireball had never truly collapsed. All of this, Yi Xian, who was sitting cross-legged in the 10-colored fireball at the mouth of the Shenong Cauldron that was shrouded in 9-colored fog, had already expected this before he entered seclusion. But, as his seclusion began, his mind was completely immersed in it. Gradually, he forgot everything around him. Yi Xian no longer sensed anything that was happening outside the fireball. He was completely unaware of it. From then on, time slowly passed. Yi Xian's body was filled with top-grade resources like the Chaos Herbs, Heavenly Tao Blood Essence, and a level 31 Primordial Chaos Pill. They were gradually refined in his limbs and meridians, fusing into his body. During this process, his sea of consciousness and body were undergoing a baptism and transformation, transforming from the Heavenly Tao realm to the Primordial Chaos realm. Following that, with the advancement of this transformation, Yi Xian's body began to emit the primordial chaos aura after the heavenly Tao. It was very weak in the beginning, but it continued to rise. Later on, it became richer. The rich primordial chaos aura emitted from the Shenong Cauldron that was shrouded in 9-colored fog. It reached the 10-colored fireball outside the cauldron and enveloped the 500 million kilometer void. Following that, it spread out from the fireball's void. It was first detected by the 13 old monsters of primordial chaos that were surrounding the fireball, causing their expressions to change abruptly. After a long while, it was detected by the 1,000-odd heavenly Tao old monsters in the second layer of the encirclement 500 billion kilometers away. When these heavenly Tao old monsters realized what was happening, their reactions were even more intense. Nearly all of them trembled violently as their breathing quickened. This was what they were most looking forward to. Unfortunately, it wasn't happening to them. 2 years passed in a flash. With the end of Yi Xian's seclusion, he successfully broke through the heavenly Tao and stepped into the primordial chaos realm, becoming a supreme existence at the great Tao level. The primordial chaos aura that emanated from his body finally reached a peak state. Rumble! Boom! At that moment, the primordial chaos void outside the 10-colored fireball sensed it. High in the dark void, there was suddenly an earth-shattering rumble of thunder without any warning. However, although the sound of the thunder was alarming, there wasn't a single tribulation cloud in the void. There was nothing. This was a sign that the primordial chaos lightning tribulation was about to descend. The primordial chaos lightning tribulation was not like the primordial chaos pill tribulation. Although the primordial chaos pill tribulation also contained the power of primordial chaos, its power was limited. It was between the heavenly Tao lightning tribulation and the primordial chaos lightning tribulation. The power of the primordial chaos lightning tribulation was even more powerful. It was a baptism and test that a peak heavenly Tao realm expert at the 9th stage of perfection would experience after successfully breaking through the heavenly Tao and stepping into the primordial chaos Tao realm. The appearance of this primordial chaos lightning tribulation meant that a primordial chaos old monster was about to appear. In other words, the violent bear in the 10-colored fireball had successfully broken through and stepped into the primordial chaos realm after a short 2 years of seclusion. These thoughts flashed through their minds. Whether it was the 13 old monsters of primordial chaos like the nether wolf and the black-blooded blue crocodile or the 1,000-odd heavenly Tao old monsters in the second layer of encirclement, all of them trembled violently. Their expressions changed as they cried out involuntarily. Chapter 51-63. Rumble. Boom. As Yixin broke through, the primordial void outside the 10-colored flame ball sensed it. Without any warning, an earth-shattering thunderclap came from high up in the dark void. The sound of the thunder was extremely shocking, but there was not a single tribulation cloud in the void. It was empty. This was the sign that the primordial lightning tribulation was about to descend. His appearance meant that a grand mist old monster was about to appear in the world. In other words, the violent bear in the 10-colored flame ball had successfully broken through and stepped into the primordial chaos realm after a short 2 years of seclusion. Brain, as these thoughts flashed through their minds, regardless of whether it was the nether wolf, the black-blooded blue crocodile, or the 1,000 over heavenly Tao old monsters in the second layer, all of them trembled violently. Their expressions changed as they cried out involuntarily. Heavens, the primordial lightning tribulation? This is the sign of a breakthrough. The 14th primordial chaos old monster on the left bank of the Milky Way has been born and is about to appear. It's only been 2 years. What kind of effect is this? Simply too shocking. In just 2 years, he stepped into the primordial chaos realm from the peak of the 9th stage Great Perfection Heavenly Tao. When could the gap between the Great Tao be crossed so easily? Treasure pill. It must be the effect of that treasure pill. This violent bear refined more than one supreme treasure pill, at least 2. Before we arrived, one of them must have successfully passed the baptism of the pill tribulation and been kept by him. We didn't even see it. It can't be wrong otherwise. That supreme treasure pill would have been detonated by him, almost causing the nether wolf to be heavily injured. If he only had this one treasure pill, how could the violent bear enter the great Tao primordial chaos after breaking through to the heavenly Tao? It's too terrifying. It only took a short 2 years for a peak 9th stage Great Perfection Heavenly Tao old monster to step into the primordial chaos realm. The medicinal effect of this supreme treasure pill is simply unheard of and unimaginable. There should be more than 2, right? One was detonated by him, and the other was swallowed by the violent bear himself. If there's a third, this old man's heart is beating so fast that it's about to jump out of his throat. Not to mention 3, even if there are 30, so what? The violent bear is already a primordial chaos old monster above the heavenly Tao. Do you have the qualifications to covet the supreme treasure pill in his hands? So what if you're grand mist old monster? After all, he has only just broken through, and there are now 13 great Tao realm experts of the same level as him surrounding the 10-colored fireball. Moreover, his cultivation has already stabilized after his breakthrough. Even if Wild Bear successfully broke through, he has no choice but to submit. If he really is the Demon Palace Master, Yixin, then today's matter will be even more difficult to resolve. His reputation is too fierce and the threat is too strong. These 13 Grand Mist old monsters won't let him leave so easily. They might even suppress him on the spot. A true world-shaking battle is about to erupt. A clash between the Grand Mist level powerhouses? We don't want to be caught in the crossfire. Roar! Screech! Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh! Cries of alarm echoed out like a tidal wave, as all these heavenly Tao beasts and old freaks threw their heads back and roared wildly. retreating to avoid 1,000,000,000,000 miles away, while the supreme experts and desolate venerables, who were originally standing in the void 1,000,000,000,000 miles away, trembled violently. Their expressions changed drastically as they retreated once again, retreating to a distance of 2,000,000,000,000 miles away. There was nothing they could do. Even if it was a supreme expert or a desolate venerable, they were just ants to the Grand Mist eccentrics after the heavenly Tao. Once the Grand Mist level battle erupted, if they were too close, they might not even be able to withstand the aftershocks of the battle and could only retreat. All of this happened in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, there were only 13 Grand Mist eccentrics left within a radius of 1,000,000,000,000 kilometers around the 10-colored fireball. Even though this vast expanse of space had been emptied out, the atmosphere had become even more oppressive and oppressive. An iron-blooded killing intent that was so dense that it could not be dispersed was rapidly spreading. Swish! A faint sound of breaking through the air rang out. Yishen walked out of the cauldron that was shrouded in 9-colored fog. With a wave of his hand, he kept the Shinnong cauldron into his body. At that time, he was in his human form. He was dressed in a blue robe and looked extremely young and handsome. His expression was calm and his eyes were cold. Although there was no sadness or joy in them, and he was like an ancient well without ripples, he imperceptibly emitted an oppressive aura that made others unable to look at him directly. Baiyu Gang had just broken through, so the current Yishen could not activate the 9-Devil Ape transformation bloodline ability. Just after stepping into the Grand Mist realm, the invisible Grand Mist power drifting in the void was still changing his sea of consciousness and treasure body. This process was slow and long and was far from over. Now, the current him, the strength of his physical body was only compatible with his true realm, which was the Grand Mist level 1. If he forcibly activated the 9-Devil Ape transformation bloodline ability, because the strength of his physical body was not enough, even if Yishen could display the power of the Grand Mist level 2, he was afraid that he would not be able to last long. And it was very likely that it would have a certain impact on his body because his physical body could not withstand this level of power. Only just activating the 9-Devil Ape transformation bloodline ability was already like this. If this bloodline ability was displayed to the first transformation or even higher level, the situation would obviously be even more serious. In other words, his current true battle strength was only the same as his cultivation realm, the Grand Mist level 1. Only with the continuous advancement of the transformation of his sea of consciousness and physical body to a certain extent could he activate the 9-Devil Ape transformation bloodline ability and possess the power of the Grand Mist level 2. Then, the first transformation, the second transformation, until the final transformation of his sea of consciousness and physical body was completed, he would be able to withstand the peak power of the 9th transformation. And if this transformation process was allowed to progress normally, it would obviously take a long time, but it doesn't matter. Yishen can use the battle to speed up the entire process. A Grand Mist level battle? So what if it's one against many? The more bloody the baptism, the faster the transformation process will be completed. Walala, whoosh, as he muttered softly, a cold light flashed in Yishen's eyes. With a wave of his hand, the sound of waves of flames was heard. The 10-colored fireball that surrounded and protected him collapsed, turning into a majestic and endless sea of flames. Then, in an instant, it shrank to the extreme and turned into a 10-colored flame the size of a finger. It shot into the space between Yishen's eyebrows and disappeared. At this moment, as the 9-colored sea of flames disappeared, the void that was originally covered by the sea of flames was no longer blocked. Everything inside was revealed. In the empty space, there was only a single human figure standing there. He wore a blue robe and had his hands behind his back. His eyes were cold and his expression was devoid of sorrow or joy. It was Yishen. Look at this. When his figure appeared, it was no longer the violent cosmic bear that had rushed into the 10-colored fireball. The thousands of heavenly Tao's old monsters, the Almighties, and the barren supremacies in the void trembled violently. However, they had expected it. They sucked in cold breaths, and cries of surprise rose again. When the 10-colored fireball disappeared, the violent cosmic bear that had rushed into the 10-colored fireball was nowhere to be seen. Instead, the figure of a human powerhouse appeared. The thousands of heavenly Tao's old monsters, the Almighties, and the barren supremacies in the void were first stunned. Then their bodies trembled violently. However, what appeared on their faces was that they had expected it. Then, as they sucked in cold breaths, cries of surprise rose again in the void. It's really him. I should have guessed it a long time ago. The master of the magic hall, Yi Xian. Although there are as many experts on the left bank as there are hairs on a cow, for so many years, there have been very few experts who can shake or even kill the top 10 beasts on the left bank's Heavenly Dao ferocious beast list. Previously, the master of the magic hall did it. Then, a violent cosmic bear appeared out of nowhere and was even more ferocious than him. This is not normal. I understand now. The reason why the pill tribulation descended 4 years ago was not because the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, had comprehended the secret method to refine the 9 heavenly Dao treasured liquid left behind by the ancestor of the remnant people, Hong Quebec. That was only one aspect. More importantly, he had already comprehended the supreme pill formula of the primordial pill at that time, which led to the primordial pill tribulation. Hiss! It's too shocking. Just a pill formula is enough to cause the primordial pill tribulation to descend. No wonder the supreme pill he refined has such a miraculous effect. After swallowing it, a peak 9th stage Great Perfection Heavenly Dao successfully broke through and stepped into the primordial Dao realm after the Heavenly Dao realm in just 2 short years. Unfortunately, all of this has been exposed. Such a supreme pill is too shocking. Even a grand Dao realm existence in the primordial Dao realm cannot help but be moved. The master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, has just broken through. Facing the 13 old monsters of the primordial Dao realm who have already stabilized their realms, he is destined to be suppressed here today and fall into the miserable state of being suppressed for eternity. Rumble, rumble, rumble. Boom. In the next moment, along with the cries of surprise and lamentation in the surrounding void and the disappearance of the 10-colored fireball, the primordial Dao realm in the outside world seemed to have sensed it. Suddenly, in the dark void high above, an earth-shaking rumble of thunder suddenly sounded without warning. The sound of the thunder was incomparably shocking, but there was not a single tribulation cloud in the void. It was completely empty. This was the sign that the primordial lightning tribulation was about to descend. Subordinate Yi Xian's primordial lightning tribulation moved. Look, when it arrived at Yi Xian, the 13 old monsters of the primordial Dao realm who were surrounding the void were all stunned, and their expressions were all different. Among them, the expressions of the nether wolf and the black-blooded blue crocodile were the most unsightly. They were so black that it was almost possible to squeeze water out of them. Among the 13 old monsters of the primordial Dao realm, the 2 of them were the earliest to appear in the world. However, in reality, the strength of the 13 old monsters was basically the same. This was because all of them had just broken through to the primordial Dao realm and had only come out of seclusion after stabilizing their cultivation. It had only been slightly more than a year since they appeared in the world. In terms of cultivation, the 13 old fellows were all at the first level of the primordial Dao realm. Although there were differences in strength, there was not much difference between them. They were basically evenly matched. Therefore, when the news of the arrival of the nether wolf and the black-blooded blue crocodile, the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, a peak 9th stage Heavenly Dao realm expert, escaping from under their noses, almost all of the other 11 old fellows had mocked and ridiculed. The strength of the 3 old fellows was equal. None of them feared the other, and none of them were willing to submit to the other. Although the nether wolf and the black-blooded blue crocodile were furious, they could do nothing to the other 11 old fellows. They imperceptibly placed this debt on Yi Xian's head, and their resentment towards him could be said to be extremely deep. Originally, they thought that Yi Xian had voluntarily exiled himself to the primordial chaos and was no longer able to return. Thus, although they felt hatred in their hearts, they slowly forgot about this matter. But now, not only had Yi Xian returned, he had even used the identity of the violent starry sky bear to wreak havoc on the left bank and deceive them. This was simply hateful, and it made the 2 of them suddenly feel as if they had been played once again. Especially the nether wolf. He had been tricked by Yi Xian in public 2 years ago. At the price of self-destructing a primordial chaos pellet, he was almost heavily injured. At that time, Yi Xian had not yet entered seclusion, and was not a primordial chaos old monster. He was merely a peak heavenly Tao at the 9th level of perfection. This matter would definitely cause him to be ridiculed by the other old monsters. Even the black-blooded blue crocodile, who had been ridiculed with him earlier, would very likely join in and ridicule him in order to divert the attention of the other old monsters. All of this made the nether wolf so furious that he was about to explode. When he saw Yi Xian's figure appear, he raised his head and roared, "It's you!" or "Rumble!" Without further ado, just as the roar sounded out, his figure, which was tens of thousands of kilometers long, shot out like a meteor. His speed was extremely fast as he charged towards Yi Xian. After reaching the primordial chaos Great Tao realm, regardless of whether it was a ferocious beast or a remnant, the size of their body could be as large as a star domain, and the size of a speck of dust. The nether wolf's current size was just a casual result. Although the heavenly Tao ferocious beasts in the surrounding void were all tens of millions of kilometers in size, in terms of aura and strength, they could not be compared at all. At this moment, he roared in fury, and the power in his body was pushed to the limit. His speed was too fast and his power was too violent. Wherever his body passed, the void would rapidly collapse. Such a powerful aura caused even the expressions of the thousands of heavenly Tao old monsters in the distance to change. However, the primordial lightning tribulation of the magic hall master, Yi Xian, was about to descend, but the nether wolf was not afraid. He had also experienced the primordial lightning tribulation, and he had withstood it then. Although he had suffered quite a few injuries 2 years ago, in the nether wolf's opinion, his full-strength attack in anger, coupled with the power of the primordial lightning tribulation, was definitely enough to kill the magic hall master, Yi Xian, in an instant. Although 2 years was too short and his injuries had yet to recover, facing the primordial lightning tribulation was not a matter of life and death. The impact and threat was not small. After all, he had not reached the 2nd level of the primordial lightning tribulation. However, as long as his opponent died, the primordial lightning tribulation would disperse. This was a great tribulation that belonged to the magic hall master, not him. Therefore, he didn't have the slightest bit of worry. He was determined to kill Yi Xian in front of everyone and wash away his humiliation. Of course, after killing his opponent, it was only right for him to smoothly obtain his storage magic treasure and various secret treasures. "I was thinking that you looked familiar, but I recognized you when you barked. I didn't expect you to be... You old dog." Yi Xian had naturally recognized the nether wolf long ago. At this moment, he said this on purpose to provoke him. Crack? A woo. Before he finished speaking, Yi Xian had already waved his hand. At this moment, the spiritual lightning technique was fully activated. Without any warning, a blood-red bolt of lightning appeared out of thin air above the nether wolf's head. It was hundreds of millions of kilometers in diameter, and with a clear cracking sound, it instantly enveloped the nether wolf's enormous body and drowned it. An exceedingly shrill howl sounded out as a mist of blood exploded out. At this moment, the nether wolf had been caught off guard and unexpectedly bled. Even though it hadn't perished, its injuries from before hadn't healed, and now that new injuries had been added to it, it was probably to the extent of being heavily injured. Kacha? A woo. In the next moment, Yi Xian waved his hand, and without any warning, a blood-red bolt of lightning appeared out of thin air above the nether wolf's head. With a diameter of hundreds of millions of kilometers, it exploded with a clear cracking sound. In an instant, it enveloped the nether wolf's enormous body and drowned it. An incomparably mournful howl rang out as a bloody mist exploded. The nether wolf was completely caught off guard and unexpectedly bled. Although it did not die, its previous injuries had not healed. Now that it was injured again, it was likely that it had reached the level of serious injury. As expected 2 years ago, Yi Xian had yet to break through and was not at the primordial realm. With his cultivation at the peak of the 9th stage, even if he used the spiritual lightning technique with all his might, it would be impossible for him to hurt the nether wolf. This was because the blood-red lightning could not hit the target at all. Before it appeared, there would be a warning and the nether wolf would avoid it. However, now Yi Xian had already broken through and stepped into the primordial realm. He had also become an existence at the Great Tao level. When he used it with all his might, the power of the spiritual lightning technique was already worlds apart from before. Although he had just broken through and his realm had not completely stabilized, the Nether Wolf was only at the first level of the primordial realm. Yi Xian had always been invincible among his peers. Even if his realm had not stabilized, he was not weaker than the Nether Wolf in a head-on battle. However, therefore, a casual spiritual lightning technique had caused the Nether Wolf to suffer new injuries and be heavily injured. There was no suspense at all. Yi Xian was certain that this would be the result he had long expected. A Wu! You actually injured this venerable? Damn it! This is simply damnable. In next to no time, the sea of lightning formed from the blood-red lightning dispersed, and the Nether Wolf's figure was revealed. Half of its body was completely covered in a golden-red color, and this scene caused the figures of the experts in the distance to shake violently while their expressions changed violently. However, he was only heavily injured. This spiritual lightning technique was not enough to cause the death of a primordial realm old monster who had stabilized his realm. As the sea of lightning dissipated, the Nether Wolf raised its head and let out a mournful howl. At the same time, the voice of the divine sense was transmitted, and its figure flashed once again, charging toward Yi Xian. He was furious. He did not even care about his current state of heavy injuries. His eyes were blood-red, and his only thought was to kill Yi Xian on the spot. Since you want to die, then this lord will send you on your way. Boom! When he saw this scene, a cold light flashed in Yi Xian's eyes. He spoke softly, and with a sway of his body, he had already transformed into a starry sky berserk ape. His body was also tens of millions of kilometers long, about the same size as the Nether Wolf. When he punched out, a terrifying aura swept out, and the space within a radius of 10 billion kilometers was instantly thrown into chaos. Rumble! Boom! At the same time, Yi Xian's primordial lightning tribulation also exploded under the detection of the void. Suddenly, an earth-shattering rumble of thunder came from high up in the dark void without any warning. An invisible force of lightning enveloped the 10 billion kilometers of void where Yi Xian and the Nether Wolf were fighting. Its momentum was incomparably shocking, causing the place to become even more chaotic. Although there was not a single tribulation cloud in the void, and there was nothing there, only a violent and endless power wreaking havoc. However, there was an invisible and terrifying aura that could destroy the heavens and earth. Even the thousands of Heavenly Dao's old monsters who had already retreated 1 trillion kilometers away were shocked. When they regained their senses, they cried out involuntarily, "Hiss! The Nether Wolf is actually heavily injured. It's only been a single exchange." He was careless. Perhaps in his consciousness, he still thought that the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, was the peak of the Heavenly Dao back then. Before he could change his mind, he was hit head-on. The current master of the magic hall is also the old monster of primordial chaos after the Heavenly Dao. His spiritual lightning technique is impossible to guard against, and there are no signs at all. On the same level of foundation, even the old monster of primordial chaos would have a headache and fear. He was too rash. Right now, the Nether Wolf is already heavily injured. If he was only facing the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, who had just broken through and had not completely stabilized his realm, then it would be fine. However, he was currently undergoing the primordial lightning tribulation, and the Nether Wolf was entangled with him in battle. His aura would definitely be locked onto by the primordial lightning tribulation. The final outcome of this battle is really too difficult to predict. I still don't think that the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, will be able to inflict more injuries on the Nether Wolf. Even if he can cause the Nether Wolf to suffer new injuries, the latter is not a stupid person. He will realize that the situation is not good and will definitely retreat when the situation is not good. Furthermore, the outcome of this battle will definitely cause the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, to be injured. When that time comes, the other 12 old monsters of primordial chaos will be able to easily suppress him. In the end, the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian's fate has already been decided. There is no way to change it, and there is no way to reverse it. No matter how ferocious he is now, it is only a final struggle before he is suppressed. Roar! Roar! Rumble. Along with the cries of alarm in the surrounding void, the old monsters from all sides surrounded the battlefield that spanned billions of miles. Although the aura was still extremely chaotic and nothing could be seen, only a chaotic and violent energy was surging and wreaking havoc. However, amidst this shockingly violent aura, the roars of the violent ape and the howls of the nether wolf could be heard from time to time. Mixed within it was the earth-shattering rumbling of thunder. Just from this point alone, one could imagine the terrifying might of the battle between Yi Xian and the underworld wolf at the pinnacle of the battle. Gradually, the raging aura of this berserk strength chi became more and more intense. However, the cries of alarm that came from all directions slowly stopped. Far away 3 to 4 trillion miles away, the almighty experts and desolate venerables from the ominous beast Forbidden Lands and the remnant star area on the left bank held their breaths and opened their eyes wide. They didn't want to miss a single moment as they paid close attention to the battle. Although they couldn't see anything, this was a battle of the Great Tao at the Grand Mist level. It was rare for them to witness it. A little closer, in the void a trillion miles away, the 1,000 or so heavenly Tao old monsters were so excited that their bodies were trembling slightly. Due to the close distance and the fact that their cultivation levels were higher, they could more or less comprehend some things. A battle of the Great Tao at the level of Hongmeng had a special enlightenment to them. Even if they didn't gain much, it was already rare and precious. As for nearby, 200 billion miles away, the 12 Grand Mist old monsters all frowned. Their expressions became more and more serious and uneasy. Time passed slowly. Unknowingly, half an incense stick of time had passed. Bam! A woo! Right at this moment, in the central region, a shocking explosion suddenly sounded out. Following that, the miserable howls of the nether wolf could be heard. It was unprecedentedly mournful. Rumble. At this moment, the last bolt of invisible lightning struck down, and the primordial lightning tribulation that belonged to Yi Xian dissipated. The entire void suddenly fell into silence. At the same time that the storm stopped, a figure walked out from the gradually weakening aura. It was Yi Xian. Bam! A woo! Up ahead, in the central region where the great battle was taking place, a shocking explosion suddenly rang out, and right after that, the miserable howls of nether wolves rang out. It was unprecedentedly miserable and shrill. Rumble. At this moment, the last bolt of invisible lightning struck down, and the primordial lightning tribulation that belonged to Yi Xian dissipated. The entire void suddenly fell into silence. At the same time that the storm stopped, a figure walked out from the gradually weakening aura. It was Yi Xian. At this moment, the cultivation aura that emanated from his body was clearly much more condensed and powerful than when the battle started half an incense stick of time ago. Before this battle, Yi Xian had just broken through, and his realm had not stabilized, so he could not activate the 9 Devil Ape Transformation's bloodline ability. Because he had just stepped into the primordial realm, the invisible primordial energy drifting in the void outside the treasured cauldron was still changing his sea of consciousness and treasured body. This process was slow and long, and it was far from over at that time. The strength of his physical body was only compatible with his true realm, which was the first level of the primordial realm. If Yi Xian forcefully activated the bloodline ability of the 9 Devil Ape Transformations, because his physical body was not strong enough, even if he could use the power of the second level of the primordial realm, he would not be able to last long. Extremely, it might have a certain effect on his body, because his physical body could not withstand this level of power. But after half an incense stick of time, his realm had stabilized. Although he could not use the first transformation, just activating the bloodline ability of the 9 Devil Ape Transformations was no longer a problem. Activating the bloodline ability of the 9 Devil Ape Transformations could instantly raise his cultivation realm by a small level. At the last moment of the battle, Yi Xian had obtained the power of the second level of the primordial realm. Unless it was a sneak attack, it was basically impossible for a second level of the primordial realm to explode a first-level expert with one punch. But at that time, Ming Lang was already seriously injured, and in addition to the fact that he had been fighting with Yi Xian all this time, he had a clear understanding of his strength. He simply did not expect that he could suddenly raise his cultivation realm by a level in the middle of the battle. So when Yi Xian punched out, Ming Lang underestimated his opponent and did not treat it seriously at all. By the time he realized that something was wrong, everything was already too late. With this punch, Ming Lang exploded, his body exploding into a majestic blood mist that was absorbed by Yi Xian with a wave of his hand and sent to the fire pool at the bottom of the volcano in the central region of the Shenong treasured cauldron to condense the blood essence. But the majestic blood mist formed by the explosion of a primordial realm ferocious beast's body would surely be able to be refined into a primordial blood essence. This was too precious, and Yi Xian was extremely delighted. After the primordial realm was the final level of the supreme primordial realm. Even though Yi Xian had just stepped into the primordial realm and was completely unaware of the supreme primordial realm after the primordial realm, this primordial blood essence would surely be of great use in the future, so he kept it in his possession. Bi-primordial realm experts were too rare, so every single primordial blood essence was a supreme resource that was rare and precious. Of course, besides this primordial blood essence, Yi Xian had other gains from this battle. The Heavenly Dao Quintessence Elixir, and even the 9 Grand Dao Treasured Elixir in Ming Lang's possession were included. Besides that, there were also some other top-rate cultivation resources. Everything was taken away by Yi Xian with a wave of his hand as the spoils of war. At this moment, Yi Xian, who was in his ape form, walked out of the violent energy that was gradually calming down. His treasured body was completely unharmed, and his eyes flickered with a blazing bright light. Moreover, the aura of his cultivation that effused out from his body had clearly attained the 2nd level of the primordial realm. Such a cultivation was world-shocking. After all, even the 3,000 chaotic fiend gods that were born at the beginning of the primordial era were practically all at the 1st level of the primordial realm. Moreover, only a few amongst them possessed a cultivation at the 2nd level of the primordial realm as soon as they were born. In other words, Yi Xian's current strength could be considered to be at the top even amongst those 3,000 chaotic fiend gods. Even though there were still 12 formidable primordial realm experts standing guard in the surroundings, and they were only 100,000 kilometers away from Yi Xian in space, all 12 of them were at the 1st level of the primordial realm without exception. Even though there was a slight difference in their combat strengths, the difference wasn't great. Even the strongest amongst them was still quite a distance away from attaining the 2nd level of the primordial realm. Exchanging in other words, the current Yi Xian was definitely worthy of being called the strongest person in this vast and boundless primordial chaos void. Even among the old monsters of primordial chaos that had just been born, he was still able to stand out from the crowd. Such supreme grace and unparalleled dominance. As soon as his figure appeared, the cultivation in his body spread out, instantly causing the thousands of Heavenly Dao's old monsters to tremble in unison. Even more so, even this ancient primordial realm void seemed to tremble slightly at this moment, as if it was throbbing in fear of Yi Xian's current terrifying cultivation. Even further away, the mighty figures and desolate venerables from the ominous beast Forbidden Grounds and the remnant star domain on the left bank were so frightened that their knees went weak. If they hadn't clenched their teeth and held on, they would have knelt down on the spot. Although the 1st level of the primordial realm and the 2nd level of the primordial realm were both at the early stage of the primordial realm, and there was only a small difference between them. However, the aura and pressure were completely different. The invisible deterrent force against the mighty figures and desolate venerables had increased by more than several times. The 12 Grand Mist Old Monsters, who were only 200 billion kilometers away from Yi Xian, saw that he had walked out of the violent battle by himself, and that the cultivation aura in his body had become so powerful in a short period of time for an incense stick to burn. Similarly, everyone's bodies trembled violently, and their expressions changed drastically as they gasped and cried out involuntarily. What happened? The Nether Wolf actually died. How is this possible? In just a short period of time, the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, killed the Nether Wolf. This is simply heaven-defying, too shocking. Although the Nether Wolf is already heavily injured and has to endure the might of the primordial lightning tribulation with him, it is still a supreme primordial realm great Dao. Even if it is killed, it is impossible to end everything in such a short period of time. The 2nd level of the primordial realm. Heavens, the cultivation aura emanating from his body, has actually reached the 2nd level of the primordial realm. What exactly happened? All of this is simply like an illusion. It is simply unrealistic, but it really happened. In just a short period of time, the master of the magic hall, who had just broken through and stepped into the primordial Tao realm, actually became a terrifying existence at the second level of this realm. When did it become so easy to advance in the primordial realm? This old man has heard before that the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, has a very heaven-defying bloodline ability that can forcefully raise one's cultivation by an entire realm. Moreover, there is no time limit. It seems like this is most likely the reason. This child cannot be left alive. That's right. If he continues to grow, we will all be killed by him one by one in the future. Let's join hands and take advantage of the fact that he has yet to mature to kill him here today. Roar. Ruthless. Chapter 51-64. As Yi Xian killed the underworld wolf, his own cultivation rose to the second level of Grand Mist. The 12 Grand Mist old monsters, who were only 200 billion kilometers away from him, all trembled violently. Their expressions changed drastically as they sucked in a cold breath and cried out involuntarily. I've heard that the Magic Hall's master, Yi Xian, has a heaven-defying bloodline ability that can forcefully raise one's cultivation by a large realm. Furthermore, there's no time limit. From the looks of it, this child cannot be left alive. That's right. If he continues to grow, we will all be killed by him one by one in time. Let's join forces and take advantage of the fact that he has yet to mature to kill him here today. Roar. Ruthless. As the exclamations rang out, the 12 Grand Mist old freaks instantly reached a consensus. They wanted to join forces and kill Yi Xian before he fully matured. They were indeed frightened. On the one hand, it was because the nether wolf had been killed. On the other hand, it was because Yi Xian's cultivation speed was too shocking. Even in the heavenly Tao realm, breaking through a minor realm required a long time. While, after reaching the primordial Tao realm, breaking through a minor realm required an even longer period of time. Could easily take more than 100,000 years. While Yi Xian had just broken through and it had only been a great battle. In the time it took for an incense stick to burn, his originally unstable cultivation had already become incomparably solid, and he had even broken through from the first level of the Grand Mist realm to the second level of the Grand Mist realm. Even the word miracle wasn't enough to describe all of this. While they were envious, jealous, and resentful, they also felt an extremely strong sense of fear. Currently, Yi Xian was only at Grand Mist Stage 2. Although he was stronger than them, it was still possible to kill him if the 12 Grand Mist old freaks joined forces. However, if Yi Xian was given a little more time to grow to Grand Mist Stage 3 or even the mid-stage Grand Mist Stage 4, at that time, even if they joined forces, it was impossible for them to be Yi Xian's match. While, if they were targeted by Yi Xian alone, they would definitely perish after a huge battle. The slightest bit of carelessness could even result in instant death. They were all existences that had lived for countless years. They were born when the early primordial chaos era was ending and the middle was approaching. Just entering seclusion at the peak of the heavenly Tao realm at the 9th stage of perfection took them millions of years to break through to the primordial chaos great Tao realm. But, therefore, they cherished their lives and their cultivation Tao attainments more than anyone else. The more powerful an existence was, the more afraid they were of death. This was not without reason, because the more powerful an existence was, the more suffering they would have to go through. Naturally, they would cherish it even more. Therefore, in their eyes, the current Yi Xian had already become a huge threat, a true thorn in their side. No matter what, they had to join hands to kill him today. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to sleep and eat in peace. Boom! Rumble! With these thoughts flashing through their minds, the 12 powerful primordial chaos old freaks moved. Among them were remnant old freaks and supreme ferocious beasts. Although they were of different sizes, the cultivation auras that emanated from their bodies were extremely terrifying. Even heavenly Tao realm experts would tremble in fear when facing such a terrifying pressure. There was no way they could withstand it. Amidst heaven's frenzied roars, the void rapidly collapsed. Rumbling thunder resounded in all directions as the void within 1 trillion kilometers was completely enveloped by chaotic and violent forces. It was impossible to see anything. The 12 powerful primordial chaos old freaks gathered around Yixin and began a terrifying battle royale that had never been seen before in history. The scene was too shocking. It was just a chaotic battle between 13 people, but their auras wreaked havoc in the vast void that spanned 1,000,000,000,000 kilometers. The mighty figures and desolate supremacies who were watching from afar were so frightened that they nearly fell to the ground. Without any hesitation, they turned and fled. They were 3 to 4 trillion kilometers away from Yixin's location in the void, but they still found it unsafe. They retreated once again and only stopped when they were 7 to 8 trillion kilometers away. They wore looks of horror as they looked back at the battle. As for the 1,000+ heavenly Tao old freaks that had retreated 1,000,000,000,000 kilometers away, they nearly peed themselves in fright. This was a chaotic battle between 13 primordial chaos old freaks. The violent auras wreaked havoc at an alarming rate. The chaotic battle spanned 1,000,000,000,000 kilometers, and its periphery was already right in front of them. If they were not careful, they would be implicated. When these primordial chaos old freaks engaged in a chaotic battle, they pushed their powers to their limits. Even if the remnant forces brushed past them, the outcome was certain that they would not be able to withstand it. It was only natural that they would be heavily injured on the spot. It was even possible that they would perish. Under such circumstances, no one wanted to be caught in the crossfire. The thousands of heavenly law ferocious beasts and the old monsters did not hesitate at all. They turned around and retreated immediately. They did not stop until they were 3 to 4 trillion miles away in the distant void. Then they turned around and looked into the distance again. Although they were frightened and worried that they would be implicated, 3 to 4 trillion kilometers away should be considered a safe distance. After all, they were all heavenly Tao old freaks. Although they were far from being comparable to the primordial chaos old freaks, they were not as weak as ants. Furthermore, this kind of primordial mountain-level battle, especially the full-scale chaotic battle between 13 primordial chaos old freaks, had an equally shocking effect on them. Such as this opportunity was simply an opportunity for them. In the future, when they entered seclusion to break through to the primordial chaos Great Tao realm, it was very likely that they would benefit from this battle and gain more enlightenment. Therefore, although they were a little afraid of such a battle, they would definitely not miss it. Even if there was a certain amount of danger, they would definitely stay far away and watch from afar with anxiety and excitement. Roar. Screech. Screech. Boom. Rumble. In the void, shocking roars and screeches could be heard from time to time. The rumbling of thunder was even more continuous, and it did not stop for even a second. Although, of course, they couldn't see anything in this battlefield that spanned a distance of 1,000,000,000,000 miles. However, just from the sounds they could hear and the chaotic and violent aura in the void before them, they could imagine how astonishing this battle was. The aura in the entire vast void was too violent and chaotic. Even the void was constantly collapsing. Following that, under the influence of the powerful primordial chaos void law, it quickly healed. Then, due to the violent power of the chaotic battle, it would once again collapse and heal, and the cycle would repeat. Time slowly passed. Everything continued in a chaotic and violent manner. No one knew the details of the battle that was taking place in this chaotic void that spanned 1,000,000,000 kilometers. However, one thing was certain, and that was that the master of the magic hall, Yixin, was definitely still alive. Otherwise, the battle would not be so shocking. Roar. No. Unknowingly, 3 days had passed. At this moment, in the center of the chaotic battlefield, a shocking roar suddenly rang out. Tight. Following that, Yixin's excited voice rang out, revealing endless arrogance. The first transformation of the 9 devil ape transformations. Third order of primordial chaos. Roar. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye, and this shocking battle that was almost unprecedented in the history of the primordial chaos era continued. No one knew the details of the battle, but it was certain that the master of the magic hall, Yixin, was still alive. Otherwise, the battle would not be so shocking. Roar. Suddenly, an earth-shattering roar came from the center of the chaotic battlefield where the aura was berserk. Tight. Following that, Yixin's excited voice rang out, revealing endless arrogance. The first transformation of the 9 devil ape transformations. Third order of primordial chaos. Roar. As the voice of his divine sense faded away, Yi Xian let out another roar. His aura was even more shocking than the previous roar because at this moment, he had already stepped into the third level of the Grand Mist Realm from the second level of the Grand Mist Realm. When Yi Xian had just appeared from the 10-colored fireball, he had only smoothly broken through, and his realm had not yet stabilized. At that time, he was still unable to activate the 9 Devil Ape Transformations bloodline ability because he had just stepped into the Primordial Chaos realm. The formless primordial chaos energy drifting in the void outside the treasure cauldron was still changing his spiritual sea and body. This process was slow and long and was far from over at that time. The strength of his physical body was only comparable to his actual realm, which was the first order of primordial chaos. Although he could forcibly activate the 9 Devil Ape Transformations bloodline ability, his physical body was too weak. Even if Yi Xian could unleash the power of the second order of primordial chaos, he would not be able to maintain it for long. It was very likely that it would affect his body to a certain extent because his physical body could not withstand this level of power. After the intense battle with the Dark Wolf for half an incense stick's worth of time, Yi Xian's newly broken through cultivation had already stabilized. Although he was still unable to use the first transformation, merely activating the bloodline ability of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape was no longer a problem. As a result, his cultivation had also soared by a level, reaching the second level of the Grand Mist Realm. All of this had happened 3 days ago. Over the past 3 days, the thousands of Heavenly Dao's old monsters, as well as the powerful figures and desolate supremacies from the Fierce Beast Forbidden Grounds and the Remnant Star region on the left bank, could not see the details of this earth-shattering battle. However, over the past 3 days, the chaotic battlefield, which spanned over 1 trillion miles, had always been violent and chaotic, and its momentum was shocking. Only just based on this point, it was enough to imagine the astonishing extent of this unprecedented battle. Yi Xian had indeed never been at a disadvantage. After all, he already had the battle strength of the second order of primordial chaos, which was an absolute advantage. However, in this battle, he was not facing a few primordial chaos old monsters, but 12 of them. This group of old guys were all ancient existences who had lived for a long time. Not only did they have all kinds of bloodline abilities and heaven-defying methods, but their battle experience was also very impressive. Therefore, over the past 3 days, Yi Xian had fought against these 12 old guys alone. Although he had never been at a disadvantage, he had never gained the upper hand either. In the past 3 days, the battle had almost been at an equal level. Double the two sides exchanged blows, and both sides were injured, while, to Yi Xian, this kind of hardy battle was undoubtedly what he yearned for the most. Only this kind of fierce battle could increase the speed of his transformation to the extreme. Now that 3 days had passed, Yi Xian had a few injuries on his body, but the more he fought, the more valiant he became. The speed and extent of his growth was simply shocking. It was at this moment when he raised his head and let out the first shocking roar. After breaking through to the primordial chaos Dao realm, his sea of consciousness and physical body had undergone a transformation to the extent that he could finally withstand the terrifying power of the third order of primordial chaos. When this realization quietly rose in his heart, Yi Xian did not hesitate at all. He immediately activated the bloodline ability of the 9 Devil Ape transformations, which he had previously activated, to the first transformation. Double with the arrival of the first transformation, his divine sense, the chi and blood force in his body, and the cultivation force in his meridians all suddenly soared. When the second roar came out of his divine sense, Yi Xian was no longer at the second order of primordial chaos Dao realm, but a supreme existence at the third order of this realm. Triple one more step, and he would be able to step into the fourth order of the primordial chaos Dao realm. Of course, this was not his true cultivation realm. His true cultivation realm was still at the first order of primordial chaos Dao realm. All of this was only possible because he had activated the bloodline ability of the 9 Devil Ape transformations to the first transformation. But there was no difference because the battle strength was real, and there was no time limit. As long as Yi Xian did not exhaust himself, as long as he did not remove the bloodline ability of the 9 Devil Ape transformations, his terrifying strength at the third order of primordial chaos Dao realm would always exist. Yi Xian had long expected all of this. In fact, whether it was the previous battle with the Dark Wolf or the chaotic battle with the 12 primordial chaos old monsters, Yi Xian had done it on purpose. Everything was exactly what he wanted. He originally wanted to use this kind of battle to accelerate the transformation of his sea of consciousness and body as much as possible. But to everyone else, this was too shocking. First, after the previous battle with the Dark Wolf, Yi Xian had stepped into the second order of Primordial Chaos Dao Realm from the first order of Primordial Chaos Dao Realm. Just that one time was enough to shock all the old monsters. Now, the 12 Primordial Chaos old monsters were fighting with him because of this reason. They gritted their teeth and made a move. They swore that they would join forces to suppress him here today. And now, after 3 days of this unprecedented chaotic battle, Yi Xian was not suppressed. Not only did he not fall into a disadvantageous position, but his cultivation realm had also skyrocketed like 3 days ago. This made everyone speechless. When his second roar was heard, it revealed a strong and clear aura of the third order of Primordial Chaos Dao Realm. The 1,000 over Heavenly Dao Realm old monsters, as well as the many powerful figures and desolate venerables, who had retreated hundreds of millions of miles away, were all shocked. After their bodies trembled in unison, their expressions changed drastically. Then, accompanied by a wave of gasps, almost all of these old fellows cried out involuntarily. Their voices were trembling, revealing endless fear. Third order of Primordial Chaos Dao Realm. The aura of this roar is definitely that of the third order of Primordial Chaos Dao Realm. Compared to the first roar, it is much, much stronger. What happened? What exactly happened? In just 3 days, the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian's cultivation realm, actually broke through again. He directly jumped from the second order of Primordial Chaos Dao Realm to the third order of Primordial Chaos Dao Realm. This is simply killing. 9 transformations of the demonic ape. So the heaven-defying bloodline ability he grasped is called the 9 transformations of the demonic ape. And now, the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, is only using the first transformation. If the first transformation is already able to cause his cultivation to skyrocket by a small level, then what about the second and third transformations? Could it be that each transformation can increase his cultivation by a small level? This is simply too terrifying. 9 transformations of the demonic ape. So the heaven-defying bloodline ability he grasped is called the 9 transformations of the demonic ape. And now, the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, is only using the first transformation. If the first transformation can directly increase his cultivation realm by a small level, then what about the second and third transformation? Could it be that each transformation can increase his cultivation realm by a small level? This is simply too terrifying. Following Yi Xian's second roar, a strong and clear aura of the third order of Primordial Chaos Dao Realm could be felt. The thousands of Heavenly Dao Realm's old monsters, as well as the many experts and desolate supremacies, who had retreated hundreds of millions of li away, were all shocked. Everyone trembled at the same time, and then their expressions changed greatly. Then, accompanied by the sound of people gasping like a tide, these old fellows cried out in alarm, their voices trembling, revealing endless fear. This. They had never expected that the Primordial Chaos Dao Realm after the Heavenly Dao Realm would be able to use such a heaven-defying bloodline ability to forcefully increase one's cultivation realm. Moreover, just the first transformation was enough to allow the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, to possess the terrifying cultivation realm of the third order of Primordial Chaos Dao Realm. Under such circumstances, if he were to use a few more transformations, wouldn't his cultivation realm reach the peak of the 9th order of Primordial Chaos Dao Realm? If that was really the case, who in this vast and boundless Primordial Chaos Dao Realm would be able to withstand his attacks? After all, the remaining 12 Primordial Chaos Dao Realm's old monsters on the left bank were all at the first order of Primordial Chaos Dao Realm. This was simply too terrifying. It was absolutely terrifying. Even the thousands of Heavenly Dao Realm's old monsters, the various experts, and the desolate supremes in the distant void realized it. Naturally, the 12 Primordial Chaos Dao Realm's old monsters who were fighting fiercely with Yi Xian also realized it. When Yi Xian's second roar sounded out, emitting an intense and clear aura of the third level of Grand Mist. The reactions of the 12 Grand Mist Old Monsters were even more intense. All of them cried out in shock, and even their voices were trembling. Damn it! What's going on? In a short period of 3 days, his cultivation and strength actually rose explosively once more, and it rose by a minor realm. If this continues, then all of us will perish here. 9 transformations of the demonic ape? I've never heard of such a heaven-defying bloodline ability before. It's effective even in the primordial chaos Dao realm. How did this guy do it? It's only the first transformation, and it's already allowed him to reach the third order of primordial chaos Dao realm. If this continues, and there are a few more transformations, we won't have any chance of survival. That kind of situation shouldn't happen in a short period of time. Otherwise, he would have already entered the second transformation. Although this kind of bloodline ability is heaven-defying, it still has some kind of restriction that we don't know about. No matter what, we can't let him continue to grow. We can barely endure the third order of primordial chaos Dao realm. After all, we are still in the early stage of primordial chaos Dao realm. However, if he enters the second transformation, there will be no hope when he enters the fourth order of primordial chaos Dao realm. That's right, no matter what, we have to kill this kid today. Moreover, we don't have much time left. Fellow Taoists, we can't hold back anymore. Let's use our strongest abilities and methods. This is a gamble. If we don't kill him today, even if we escape, he will find us in the future and deal with us one by one. Attack with all your might. Destroy him. Roar. Ruthless. Ruthless. Boom. Rumble. Realizing the danger they were in, the 12 Grand Mist Eccentrics raised their heads and roared wildly. Immediately afterward, thunderous booms rang out from the chaotic battle in the void that spanned a distance of 1 trillion kilometers. It was obvious that the sense of urgency in the hearts of the 12 old fellows had become even stronger. They felt that their lives were in danger, and now they no longer held back. They used their strongest abilities and methods, hoping to kill Yi Xian in one fell swoop, kill him on the spot. In the void, an earth-shattering rumble sounded out. The 12 old fellows once again rushed forward, each using their strongest techniques to surround and kill Yi Xian. Previously, when the 13 of them were fighting in a chaotic battle, the chaotic void was only about 1 trillion miles in diameter. But now the scene was even more shocking. Nothing could be seen within a 2 trillion miles radius. Only violent energy was wreaking havoc. Qi energy was chaotic, and it was a ghastly sight. Roar. Boom. Rumble. Facing this scene, Yi Xian raised his head and let out a heaven-shaking roar. His body flashed as he charged forward. The power in his body was pushed to the limit as he directly punched out. He was still in his ape form, and his body was millions of miles long. He had activated the bloodline ability of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape, and he had even used the first transformation, so his cultivation had reached the third level of the Grand Mist realm. The group of Grand Mist Old Monsters surrounding him were only at the first level of the Grand Mist realm. The gap between them was simply too great. Although a full-powered strike from a third-order Old Monster could not guarantee that it would be able to blast a first-order Old Monster to death, if a third-order Old Monster was hit by a single punch, it would be difficult to avoid serious injuries. It was precisely because of this that, when Yi Xian punched out, the expressions of the few Grand Mist Old Monsters in front of him changed. Their bodies suddenly froze, and they stopped in midair, defending with all their might. Boom! The sound was so loud that even the void exploded, forming a huge black hole. One of the Grand Mist Old Monsters had half of his shoulder stained with blood and was heavily injured. However, he quickly retreated, and his original position was replaced by another Grand Mist Old Monster, causing Yi Xian to miss the opportunity to pursue and kill him in one fell swoop. Damn it, the power of the third level of the Grand Mist realm is indeed terrifying. Fellow Taoists, please don't panic. We can't fight against this level of power. We can't fight head-on, we can only restrain him from the side. Fellow Taoists at the front, try your best to restrain his power while protecting yourself. As for the other fellow Taoists, use your full strength to kill him as soon as possible. Boom! Rumble! The violent power of the punch shocked everyone. The group of old monsters cried out in alarm one after another, and they immediately changed their strategy. Facing the third level of the Grand Mist realm, which was the peak of the early stage of this realm, they couldn't fight head-on. They could only look for an opportunity to attack from the side. However, no matter what, there would definitely be a few old monsters in front of Yi Xian to restrain his power and attention. Right? For Yi Xian, this was enough. He wasn't in a hurry to kill these old fellows immediately. After all, they were Grand Mist old monsters, and all of them had lived for countless years. They were too difficult to deal with. He was only at the third level of the Grand Mist realm, so he couldn't guarantee that he could kill them in one strike. Therefore, Yi Xian's current goal was to use these old fellows as whetstones to temper himself through bloody battles, and to increase the speed and progress of his transformation as much as possible. His goal was the second transformation of the devil ape. As long as he could successfully use the second transformation, his cultivation would reach the fourth level of the Grand Mist realm and step into the middle stage of this realm. At that time, it would be the end of these old fellows. Boom! Roar! Screech! Rumble! In the air, earth-shattering booms rang out, mixed with wild roars and screams. The battle between Xian and the 12 Grand Mist eccentrics had already entered a white-hot state. An enormous expanse of space that spanned an area of 2 trillion kilometers had already been completely enveloped by violent and chaotic energy. Nothing could be seen, and only terrifying energy was wreaking havoc. No, unknowingly, this earth-shattering battle continued for another 3 days. The situation of the battle in the past 3 days was completely different. During the first 3 days of the battle, Yi Xian had only activated the 9 Devil Ape Transformation's bloodline ability and didn't use the first transformation. At that time, his cultivation was at the second level of the Grand Mist realm, and he was fighting against 12 Grand Mist old monsters who had lived for countless years. The overall strength of both sides was basically equal, and during the 3 days of battle they were evenly matched. No one had the upper hand, but in those 3 days Yi Xian had undoubtedly gained a lot. Through this level of bloody battle, he had been constantly tempering himself. After breaking through to the Grand Mist realm, his sea of consciousness and body's transformation had advanced, so he had the ability to withstand the power of a third-level Grand Mist realm expert. In the end, Yi Xian successfully executed the first transformation of the 9 Devil Ape Transformation's bloodline ability, and his cultivation rose by a level. From then on, he possessed the strength of a third-level Grand Mist realm expert. After that, the heaven-shaking bloody battle continued. Now, another 3 days had passed, and with the strength of the third level of the Grand Mist realm, Yi Xian was engaged in an intense bloody battle with the 12 Grand Mist old monsters. The situation was completely different from the previous 3 days. For the past 3 days, the scales of the battle had been tilting towards Yi Xian's side. This was to be expected. Right now, he was already at the third level of the Grand Mist realm, and he was at the peak of the initial level. With another small breakthrough, he would be able to step into the mid-level Grand Mist realm. If it was a one-on-one battle, the 12 Grand Mist old monsters were no match for him. In a head-on battle, they would be killed in a short period of time. Although all 12 of them had used their strongest trump cards, worked closely together, and joined forces to attack Yi Xian. It was almost flawless, but to them Yi Xian was like a tiger entering a flock of sheep. No matter which direction he charged in, if the Grand Mist old monster in that direction didn't retreat, the result would be like a little lamb that had met a fierce tiger, a tragedy. Matter in truth, the reason why the 12 Grand Mist old monsters were only suppressed and didn't fall after 3 days was completely because Yi Xian's ambition wasn't in this. His purpose was only to use this group of old fogies as whetstones to temper himself through bloody battles and improve the speed and progress of his transformation as much as possible. The reason why he fought with these old monsters was because he wanted to reach the second transformation. As long as he could successfully execute the second transformation, his strength would reach the fourth level of the Grand Mist realm and step into the mid-level Grand Mist realm. At that time, these old monsters would be in big trouble. Yi Xian could easily kill one of them with a head-on attack. Like this today, 3 days had already passed. Although he had just reached the level of being able to withstand the power of the Grand Mist Third Order, and successfully displayed the first transformation of the 9 devil ape transformations bloodline, it really hadn't been that long. However, in these 3 days Yi Xian had been fighting non-stop. Sometimes, he could clearly avoid the attacks of the Grand Mist old monsters, but in order to temper himself, he chose not to dodge and instead gritted his teeth and endured the attacks head-on. Only this kind of tempering and testing of iron and blood would have the best effect on the transformation of his sea of consciousness and his body. Because in order to make his sea of knowledge and body reach the level of being able to withstand the power of the 4th level of the Grand Mist realm as soon as possible, Yi Xian was desperate to make use of all the opportunities. Unknowingly, as this bloody battle continued, the strength of his sea of knowledge and body was rapidly increasing. Now, he was only a fine line away from being able to withstand the terrifying power of the 4th level of the Grand Mist realm. Everything was clear to Yi Xian like a candle flame. When he realized that the final impact was coming, a cold light flashed in his eyes. The power in his body was pushed to the limit in an instant. He raised his head and let out a heaven-shaking roar. Roar! Shio! Rumble. The ferocious ape unleashed a series of indiscernible whistling sounds as it teleported behind one of the primordial beasts in the blink of an eye. A cold light flashed in its eyes as it raised its fist and unleashed a barrage of punches. From start to finish, in this shocking battle that was very likely to be unprecedented in the history of the Grand Mist era, Yi Xian had not used teleportation. His purpose was only to train himself, not to kill the enemy as soon as possible. Naturally, there was no need to use teleportation. It was also because of this that after 6 days of bloody battle, the 12 Grand Mist old monsters that had been besieging him had already acted as if it was a conditioned reflex. They did not expect Yi Xian to suddenly teleport at this moment. Everything was caught off guard. When everything happened, the old man who realized that something was wrong was already too late to react. Because he locked onto his figure and aura and directly teleported to the old man behind him. It was the black-blooded blue crocodile that had forced Yi Xian into a desperate situation with the dark wolf. Although this old man's aura was violent, his huge crocodile tail was extremely shocking. With a swing of his tail, tens of millions of miles of void would collapse. But, in fact, his character was extremely cautious. During the 6 days of battle, although the black-blooded blue crocodile had attacked Yi Xian from the side several times at close range, he usually retreated after a single attack. He would not take too much risk at all. But even so, for days ago, in a moment of carelessness, he was still brushed past by Yi Xian's all-out punch. A small portion of Pang Da's enormous body was already stained with blood, and it looked extremely frightening in a blue light. Today, after realizing that danger was approaching, and that it was definitely a matter of life and death, the black-blooded blue crocodile's heart was in his throat. His eyes narrowed and he did not hesitate at all. He immediately reacted. Roar! Rumble! At the same time as a shocking roar, the huge crocodile tail behind him directly swept over. At the same time, the root of the crocodile tail was cut off at the same time. The figure that lost its huge tail was like an arrow that had left the bow, shooting forward rapidly. Too decisive, too ruthless. Elder. This fellow knew that he wouldn't be able to withstand Yi Xian's all-out attack, so he actually broke his wrist at the most critical moment. The enormous crocodile tail left his body and swept towards Yi Xian, while his original body, however, took advantage of this opportunity to dash forward. With this kind of self-mutilating method, he tried to escape from Yi Xian's hands and survive. If I let you escape like this, then today, where will I put my face? Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's eyes flashed with a cold light. At the same time, the voice of his divine sense was transmitted. His figure suddenly blurred. His speed was too fast, and in the blink of an eye, he was behind the black-blooded blue crocodile. His fist rumbled like thunder as it directly smashed towards the back of the crocodile's head. Yi Xian had used all his strength in this attack. The black-blooded blue crocodile was destined to be unable to withstand this attack. It was destined to fall here. Chapter 51-65. If I let you escape like this, then where would I put my face today? Realizing that a life and death crisis was approaching, the black-blooded blue crocodile broke its own tail and swept it towards Yixin. Its body took advantage of this opportunity to rush forward explosively. It was clearly trying to escape. Yixin naturally would not let this go. A disdainful voice came out of the violent ape's mouth, and a cold light flashed in its eyes as its body suddenly flashed out. His speed was too fast. In the blink of an eye, he was behind the black-blooded blue crocodile. With a thunderous punch, he directly smashed towards the back of the crocodile's head. This Yixin had used all his strength in this attack. The black-blooded blue crocodile was destined to not be able to withstand it and would definitely fall. This was indeed the case. Rumble. Bam! Without any suspense, the sky rumbled. In the face of Yixin's full-force attack, the black-blooded blue crocodile, who was trying to escape, instantly met with an inauspicious fate. His body was completely blown up, turning into a bloody mist that spread out. This included the huge crocodile tail that had already arrived behind Yixin. In the aftermath of this incomparably violent attack, it exploded into a bloody mist. Huff! Without waiting for the bloody mist formed by the explosion of the black-blooded blue crocodile's body to spread out, the violent ape had already waved its hand at the first moment. The howling of the wind resounded, and an incomparably majestic, invisible force whistled out. Void, the boundless blood mist that was spreading in the air, was immediately swept over and sent directly into the bottom of the central region's volcano in the cauldron space. From there, the blood essence condensation began. Of course, at the same time, there was also some compressed Heavenly Tao origin liquid, some Heavenly 9 Great Tao treasure liquid, and some top-grade cultivation resources that even the Heavenly Tao Old Monster might not be able to obtain. These were originally the most precious cultivation resources in the hands of the black-blooded blue crocodile, but now that he had fallen, they all fell into the hands of Yixin. Could be considered an additional gain, and it was not cheap. Yixin took it all into his body. At this point, this shocking bloody battle lasted for 6 days. Yixin had killed another Grand Mist Old Monster. Of the 13 Grand Mist Old Monsters on the left bank of the Milky Way, after 2 had fallen in just 6 days, there were only 11 old monsters left. And, as far as Yixin was concerned, the reason he killed the 2 old monsters, the Underworld Wolf and the Black-Blood Blue Crocodile, was not only because he'd finally gotten rid of his 2 trusted enemies, but also because he'd obtained 2 precious primordial blood essences, as well as a considerable amount of Heavenly Tao origin liquid, the Heavenly 9 Great Tao treasure liquid, and other top-notch cultivation resources that even the Heavenly Tao Old Monster didn't have. More importantly, after successfully breaking through and stepping into the Grand Mist Tao realm, the transformation of his sea of consciousness and physical body was pushed forward as much as possible. 3 days ago, the strength of his sea of consciousness and physical body had already transformed to the point where they could withstand the power of a level 3 Grand Mist Master. At that time, Yixin was excited and successfully activated the first transformation of the 9 Devil Ape Transformation's bloodline ability. From then on, he possessed the terrifying power of a level 3 Grand Mist Master. And now, this shocking bloody battle had lasted for another 3 days. When the black-blooded blue crocodile, the second Grand Mist Old Monster, was killed by Yixin with a full-force punch, the transformation of his sea of consciousness and physical body had finally reached a new height and crossed a new node. Now, whether it was the strength of his sea of consciousness or physical body, he could withstand the terrifying power of a level 4 Grand Mist Master Roar. Brain. As these thoughts flashed through Yixin's mind, he was incomparably excited. Although there was only a small difference between level 3 and level 4, the significance was completely different. Level 3 was the early Grand Mist Master, but level 4 was the mid-level Grand Mist Master. In the next moment, in the center of the chaotic battlefield, a shocking roar suddenly rang out. Following that, Yixin's excited voice rang out, revealing endless arrogance and tyranny. The second transformation of the 9 Devil Ape transformations, Grand Mist, Level 4. Or, as the voice faded, Yixin, in his ape form, let out another roar. Front. The last 2 roars were only separated by a short period of time, but in comparison, the roar that came out later was clearly more shocking. It was much more powerful than the previous roar because he had stepped into the level 4 Grand Mist Master from the level 3 Grand Mist Master. The level 4 Grand Mist Master was the mid-level Grand Mist Master, and its significance was completely different from the level 3 Grand Mist Master. Everything was too shocking. The vast expanse of space in all directions suddenly fell silent under his wild roar. 6 days ago, Yi Xian had a great battle with the Nether Wolf, and in a short time, he stepped into the level 2 Grand Mist Master from the level 1 Grand Mist Master. Hong his Grand Mist Master's cultivation soared so quickly that it was beyond everyone's expectations. At that time, it had already shocked all the old monsters. At that time, the 12 old monsters of the Grand Mist Master who were fighting with him realized how difficult Yi Xian was to deal with because of this reason. Could even be said that he was extremely terrifying. So they gritted their teeth and made a move, vowing to join forces and suppress him here. But however, the truth didn't unfold as they had imagined. The 12 old fellows besieged Yi Xian alone. After 3 days of this unprecedented chaotic battle, not only was Yi Xian not suppressed, but he also didn't fall into a disadvantageous position. In fact, just like 3 days ago, his cultivation had once again skyrocketed by a level. He successfully displayed the first transformation of the 9 transformation Devil Ape Bloodline ability. And from then on, he possessed the terrifying strength of a level 3 Grand Mist Master. Now, the battle had lasted for another 3 days. Not only did Yi Xian kill a powerful old monster of the Grand Mist Master with one punch, but his own cultivation soared again. Add under the second transformation of the 9 transformation Devil Ape, he was now a supreme existence of the level 4 Grand Mist Master, the only mid-level Grand Mist Master in the vast Grand Mist Master void. At this moment, as the bloodline ability of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape was activated to the second transformation, Yi Xian's cultivation once again skyrocketed. A second roar sounded out, emitting an intense and clear aura of the 4th level of Grand Mist. Far away, in the void that had already retreated hundreds of millions of miles away, the thousands of heavenly Tao old monsters, as well as the even more powerful experts and desolate venerables, were all shocked. Then, a wave of cold gasps rang out. Almost all of these old fellows cried out in shock. Their voices were trembling with endless fear, and all of them were trembling in fear. Heavens, level for Grand Mist Master, the master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian, actually made another breakthrough in his cultivation. He's now at the mid-level Grand Mist Master of the 4th Grand Mist Master. In just 6 days, he actually went from the early-level Grand Mist Master of the 1st Grand Mist Master to the mid-level Grand Mist Master of the 4th Grand Mist Master of the 4th Grand Mist Master. Was this old man hallucinating? This is too unreal. What a terrifying bloodline ability. My previous guess has been confirmed. Even in the Grand Mist Master realm, the Magic Hall Master Yi Xian's heaven-defying bloodline ability is still effective. Every transformation can raise one's cultivation by a small level. He's only displayed the second transformation, and he's already at the level 4 Grand Mist Master. If this continues, heavens, level 4 Grand Mist Master, the master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian, actually made another breakthrough in his cultivation. He's now at the mid-level Grand Mist Master of the 4th Grand Mist Master. In just 6 short days, he actually went from the early-level Grand Mist Master of the 1st Grand Mist Master to the mid-level Grand Mist Master of the 4th Grand Mist Master. Am I hallucinating? This is too unreal. What a terrifying bloodline ability. My previous guess has been confirmed. Even in the Grand Mist Master realm, the Magic Hall Master Yi Xian's heaven-defying bloodline ability is still effective. Every transformation can raise one's cultivation by a small level. He's only displayed the second transformation, and he's already at the level 4 Grand Mist Master of the 4th Grand Mist Master. If this continues, heavens, this is simply unimaginable. As the bloodline ability of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape was activated to the second transformation, Yi Xian's cultivation once again skyrocketed. A second roar sounded out, emitting an intense and clear aura of the 4th level of Grand Mist. Far away in the void that had already retreated hundreds of millions of miles away, the thousands of heavenly Tao old monsters, as well as the even more powerful experts and desolate supremacies, were all shocked. Tight. After that, the sound of gasping resounded like tidewater. Practically all of these old fellows cried out involuntarily with trembling voices that revealed boundless terror. All of them were shivering. The second transformation? The power of the mid-level 4th Grand Mist Master is indeed completely different. At this moment, the second transformation was complete. The aura of the devilish ape was terrifyingly powerful. Even if it didn't deliberately activate it, the pressure it emitted was enough to cause the primordial chaos void to tremble slightly. Yi Xian's voice rang out at this moment. It could be heard throughout the void, revealing endless joy and excitement, as well as monstrous disdain. Speak. In the end, Yi Xian raised his head and let out a shocking roar. His aura was so violent that it made people's souls tremble. Didn't you want to besiege this lord? Don't leave today. This lord alone is enough to fight all of you. Roar! As soon as the last roar fell, Yi Xian's figure had already disappeared. In an instant, he teleported and appeared 10 billion miles away to the right. Following in the face of the ferocious ape's massive body, a primordial chaos stage old monster in this direction was instantly struck dumb, and his entire body trembled as he almost fell to the ground headfirst. Distance it was too close, just 200 million miles away. For a supreme existence at the Grand Mist Realm, such a distance was definitely considered close combat. It was no different from a melee battle. At this moment, this old monster couldn't wait to raise his hand and slap himself. He was so regretful that his intestines turned green. He was so shocked that he forgot to escape at the first moment. Like this, even though he had regained his senses, it was already too late. He was merely at the first order of the Grand Mist Realm, yet he was caught off guard by a mid-stage 4th order Grand Mist Realm expert. There wasn't the slightest bit of suspense in such a situation. As long as the other party made a move, he would definitely die on the spot. But, even if he knew that he was no match for the other party, it was absolutely impossible for him to give up struggling and wait for death. After all, he was also a Grand Mist old monster. In this Grand Mist era, except for the 3,000 Chaos Demon gods that were born at the beginning of the era, there were only 13 Grand Mist old monsters in the entire era. No, it was 14 now because the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, had just broken through a few days ago and stepped into this realm. But, with his breakthrough, the number of Grand Mist old monsters left on the left bank of the Milky Way didn't rise to 14 because of this. It only stayed at this number for a short time. Tight. After that, he continued to slide down. After the underworld wolf and the black blood blue crocodile were killed by him one after another, the original 13 of them on the left bank of the Milky Way would be strange. Even if the Demon Palace Master, Yi Xian, was included, there were only 12 left. And this number was very likely to fall again, and another Grand Mist old monster would be eliminated. The Grand Mist old monster that was about to be eliminated was most likely himself. Screech! These thoughts flashed through his mind. The old monster was shocked and angry. He raised his head and let out a shocking roar. From his mouth, an incomparably shrill voice came out. Even if I die, you won't have it easy. Explode! 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 Boom! Rumble. As his final roar sounded like a crazy roar, the space in front of the old monster of the remnant instantly exploded with extremely violent energy. Several treasures that he had kept in his body for a long time detonated at the same time. The old monster was different from the ferocious beasts. The ferocious beasts rarely sacrificed magic treasures. Their powerful bodies were the best killing treasures. However, the old monster experts not only refined medicine but also refined weapons. Therefore, any old monster expert had a few satisfactory magic treasures in his hands. Now, this old monster detonated the same kind of treasure in his hands. Currently, he was already a supreme existence at the first level of Hongmeng. Even if he had obtained enough 9 Great Tao elixir a million years ago, when he entered seclusion, he was already a peak desolate venerable at the 9th level of perfection when he entered seclusion. Moreover, he was not an ordinary peak desolate venerable. Even at that time, he had already entered the peak desolate venerable for many years. For an existence of this level, the treasures in his hands were naturally extraordinary. Moreover, after a million years of seclusion with his cultivation breakthrough, he finally stepped into the Grand Mist stage and became a supreme Great Tao powerhouse. The various treasures he had been keeping in his body had also increased in power. It was as if they had undergone sublimation and transformation. Their power was far from what it was in the past. What's more, in order to escape while detonating several supreme treasures in his hands, this old man also detonated the remaining heavenly 9 Great Tao elixir in his hands, as well as some top cultivation resources similar to the heavenly Tao elixir. But, in other words, except for himself, everything else had been completely detonated at this moment. The momentum was too amazing. The majestic and endless violent energy was exploding, and the void was collapsing rapidly. However, it did not reach a deep level, so there was no void crack in the Grand Mist turbulence that could not be repaired temporarily. Dang! The Grand Mist turbulence void crack that Yi Xian had exiled was created by the joint attack of the 2 powerful Grand Mist old monsters, the Netherwolf and the black-blooded blue crocodile. The energy generated by the detonation of the treasures alone was not enough to wreak havoc to such an extent, with the appearance of the shocking explosion. The body of the old monster of the remnant also used the recoil force to transform into a faint ray of light faster than lightning. Like a stray dog, he hurriedly fled into the distance. He was indeed in a difficult situation, and he was terrified because this was his last resort. If he could not escape with this, it would be difficult for him to escape today. He would become the 3rd Grand Mist Supreme Existence to be killed by the master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian sneered. The extremely cold voice of the divine sense also sounded, enveloping the entire vast void with the appearance of the shocking explosion. The body of the remnant old monster also used the recoil force to transform into a faint ray of light faster than lightning. Like a stray dog, he hurriedly fled into the distance. Look! Yi Xian sneered when he saw this, and his incomparably cold voice of his divine sense resounded out as well, enveloping the entire vast space. Your temperament is indeed resolute, but this is obviously meaningless. Today you are destined to fall here. Boom, boom, boom. The roar of the sky sounded without suspense. As soon as the voice fell, Yi Xian had already teleported again, and in the blink of an eye, he was behind the remnant old monster. The remnant old monster, who was desperately trying to escape, instantly encountered an ominous situation. His body was completely blown up, turning into a cloud of blood mist that spread out. Boom! Boom! When the blood mist formed by the explosion of the remnant old monster's body spread out, the violent ape had already waved his hand at the first moment. The whistling sound of the wind resounded, and a majestic invisible force roared out. Although he was only a remnant old monster, and his vitality was not rich enough, the majestic blood mist formed by the explosion of the remnant old monster could not be refined into a Grand Mist blood essence. But this was a Grand Mist level blood mist after all. It was very beneficial to the fierce beast generals under Yi Xian, so naturally it could not be wasted. In the void, the spreading blood mist was quickly swept over and directly sent into the bottom of the central region volcano in the space inside the cauldron. Unfortunately, this time there wasn't any compressed heavenly Tao origin liquid, as well as some of the heavenly 9 Great Tao treasure liquid, shooting over at the same time. This was because all of them had already been detonated by this old monster. This caused Yi Xian to feel depressed, and his expression instantly darkened to the extreme. At this time, he was very upset, very upset. Even if a Grand Mist old monster was killed on the spot, it could not calm him down. No, it doesn't matter. There are more Grand Mist old monsters here. If I kill a few more of them, I will naturally calm down. As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Yi Xian's eyes instantly flashed with a cold light. He snorted coldly and immediately looked around the void. All of this took a long time to describe, but in fact it happened in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, another Grand Mist old monster had fallen. In just a few days, this was already the 3rd Grand Mist old monster. Thinking about it carefully, it was simply terrifying. 4 the old monsters in the surrounding void were still immersed in the previous shock. It was only at this moment that they suddenly woke up. Their bodies shook violently as they sucked in a cold breath. All of them were aghast, and all kinds of exclamations suddenly sounded like a tide, covering the sky and earth. Heavens, What is this violent ape doing? In a short period of time, he actually killed 3 supreme Grand Mist Old Monsters in succession. There were only 13 Grand Mist Old Monsters on both sides of the Milky Way before. Even if he had just broken through, there were only 14 of them. Now, 3 of them have fallen in a few days, and there are only 11 left in the blink of an eye. The key is that 3 supreme Grand Mist Old Monsters have fallen. Not only did they fall at the hands of the same person, but the person who killed them did not suffer the slightest injury. This kind of battle strength is simply shocking, and it is so cruel that it makes one want to vomit. From the looks of it, the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, is clearly going to kill all the Grand Mist Old Monsters here. This kind of thought makes one's body turn cold. A Grand Mist Old Monster has actually become a prey to be slaughtered at will one day. This old man isn't dreaming, right? This is too outrageous. The heaven-defying secret technique in the hands of the Magic Hall Master is simply infuriating. It is actually effective in the Grand Mist Old Monster. In a short period of time, he has already reached the middle stage of the 4th Order Old Monster. Right now, among the 11 Supreme Grand Mist Old Monsters present, other than him, the other 10 are only at the first stage of the 1st Order Old Monster realm. Even if they join forces, they are still not his match. The master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian, is truly heaven-defying. It's not just heaven-defying. We are all supreme existences in the heavenly Tao realm, but when facing him, we can only retreat billions of miles away and tremble in fear. He is clearly stepping on the heavenly Tao like an ant under his feet. I'm afraid it's not just the heavenly Tao, right? Even if it's the supreme Grand Mist Old Monster who is at the same realm as him. Who can be a match for the master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian? Roar! Hiss! Yi Xian, are you trying to make the entire Milky Way's left bank your enemy? Don't think that we are all of the supreme Grand Mist Old Monsters on the left bank. To tell you the truth, we are only the first batch of Grand Mist Old Monsters to appear. That's right. The number of peak Heavenly Tao realm experts that entered seclusion a million years ago is far more than this. Even if only a portion of them successfully broke through and stepped into the supreme Grand Mist Old Monster realm, the number of Grand Mist Old Monsters on the left bank of the Milky Way is more than double digits. In fact, long before we entered seclusion a million years ago, there were already Grand Mist Old Monsters on both banks of the Milky Way. They were just too lazy to care about worldly affairs. Now that we have stepped into the supreme Grand Mist Old Monster realm, it is easy to imagine how high those Grand Mist Old Monsters from a million years ago were. Although you have the power of a bloodline secret technique to reach the middle stage of the 4th Order Old Monster realm, if those ancient Grand Mist Old Monsters were to appear, their cultivation might not necessarily be lower than yours. The left bank of the Milky Way has many supreme forbidden lands and supreme stellar regions that have existed for countless years. The recent million years is just a recent period of time. The waters of the left bank are far deeper than you can imagine. It's best you keep a low profile. That's right. The waters of the left bank are definitely not empty threats. Don't be too arrogant. Once those Grand Mist Old Monsters from a million years ago are drawn out, even you will be in for a tragic end. Let me give you a word of advice. Don't incur the wrath of the masses. Don't be too arrogant to prevent yourself from making a mistake. That's all I have to say. We won't argue with you today, but if you continue to be so unbridled, you will definitely taste the bitter consequences of today. Fellow Taoists, there is no need to say anything more to him. Such an arrogant and despotic person will definitely regret his actions in the future. Let's just wait and see the final outcome. Since our paths are different, there is no need to conspire together. Master of the Magic Hall, farewell. Hiss! Whoosh! Whoosh! Hiss! 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 After these words sounded, the remaining 10 Hongmeng Old Monsters in the void no longer hesitated. They raised their heads and roared. In an instant, they tore open a void crack in front of them. They rushed into the void crack and disappeared into it, while the 1,000-odd Heavenly Tao Old Monsters, who had already retreated trillions of kilometers away, trembled violently when they saw this scene. They did the same in a panic. What a joke! Faced with the supreme demonic might of the Magic Hall's master, Yi Xian, even supreme existences at the primordial chaos realm could only avoid him. After leaving behind a few harsh words, they fled with their tails between their legs. As such, with their mere heavenly Tao realm cultivation level, how could they persist? At that moment, the 1,000-odd heavenly Tao old monsters from the left bank suddenly felt like they were in a dream. When they first arrived, they had threatened the Magic Hall's master, Yi Xian, and wanted to surround and annihilate him. But now, even the grand mist old monsters that they didn't dare to provoke had turned tail and fled. Everything had changed in a short span of 10 days. The affairs of the world were truly like a dream. Whoosh! 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 Rip! In the void, the sharp sound of air being torn apart, as well as the crisp sound of ripping silk, constantly sounded, as the remaining 10 grand mist old monsters from the left bank of the Milky Way tore open a void rift and left in a hurry. The 1,000-odd heavenly Tao old monsters, who had already retreated trillions of kilometers away, also reacted. In their horror, they didn't dare to stay any longer. With extremely complicated feelings in their hearts and indescribable feelings, they also tore open a void rift and left. They really didn't dare to stay any longer. They didn't even dare to slow down. At the beginning of this incident, the 13 grand mist old monsters from the left bank of the Milky Way didn't descend. They were the main characters. More than 1,000 heavenly Tao old monsters surrounded the Magic Hall's master alone. Although it was said that he had killed many of them, but almost everyone else had participated in this. Now, in less than 10 days, the master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian, had already entered a new level, a level that they could only look up to. Even if the remaining 10 grand mist old monsters from the left bank of the Milky Way hadn't left, the master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian, would have also stepped into the Grand Mist realm and become a supreme Tao realm expert. Naturally, he wouldn't be interested in finding trouble with them. He didn't care about them at all. However, in the face of his supreme demonic might and monstrous ferocity, even the 10 grand mist old monsters from the left bank of the Milky Way were afraid. After leaving behind a few fierce words to maintain their appearances, they hurriedly fled in panic. Under such circumstances, if the master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian, hadn't vented his anger in his heart, he would definitely vent it on them next. Daunty looking at their numbers, there were still over 1,000 heavenly Tao old monsters. However, facing the Demon Palace Master Yi Xian, who had already stepped into the 4th level of the Grand Mist realm and whose cultivation had reached the middle stage of the Great Tao, even if these 1,000 heavenly Tao old monsters joined forces, they still wouldn't be a match for him. In fact, they wouldn't even be able to hold on for long. In a short period of time, the master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian, would crush them like a bunch of ants. Every single one of them would be exterminated. Under such circumstances, if they still had the guts to stay here, they would truly be tired of living. Thus, they all hurriedly fled, wishing that they could immediately sprout wings and fly away from this place. Everything seemed to take a long time to describe, but in reality, everything happened very quickly. From the moment the first of the 10 Grand Mist old monsters tore open a crack in the void in front of him and hurriedly left, to the time when all the heavenly Tao old monsters on the left bank of the Milky Way, who had retreated trillions of kilometers away, all of this happened in a mere 10 breaths of time. It wasn't just the Grand Mist old monsters and heavenly Tao old monsters who had offended Yi Xian. In fact, even the Grand Mist old monsters and desolate supremacies who came from the left bank of the Milky Way trembled in fear after witnessing Yi Xian's unparalleled ferocity. They didn't tear open a crack in the void to escape, but that didn't mean that they had the guts to continue staying here. They didn't tear open a crack in the void because it was impossible for them to do so. In this place, the so-called Grand Mist old monsters and desolate supremacies were the true core of the upper echelons of the various great beast forbidden lands and remnant star regions. But now, the master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian, had already turned into an invisible and terrifying pressure that enveloped the entire void. Under such circumstances, the Grand Mist old monsters and heavenly Tao old monsters still had the ability to tear open a crack in the void. However, the Grand Mist old monsters and desolate supremacies who were below the heavenly Tao had long lost the ability to tear open a crack in the void under the deterrence and influence of this invisible and terrifying pressure. But they didn't dare to stay. Void even further away, at least 10 billion miles away, The reason why there were densely packed sharp air-piercing sounds that came like a tidal wave was because the mighty figures and desolate supremacies were like stray dogs, forcefully activating all the power in their bodies, and hurriedly escaping to the void further away in all directions, causing the commotion caused by them hurriedly escaping. Although these grand mist old monsters and desolate supremacies were more in number, they had already retreated more than 10 trillion kilometers away. Now that they had scattered, it only took a dozen breaths of time for them to all run away. One in the blink of an eye, this void was completely deserted. Half within a radius of 10 trillion kilometers, it had long become empty. Only Yi Xian, who was tens of thousands of kilometers tall and in the form of a violent ape, was still standing in the central region of this void with a calm expression. If such a scene was seen by some experts in the starry sky who happened to pass by at this time, they would definitely not expect that just a few dozen breaths ago, this void was bustling with noise and excitement. Not only were there tens of thousands of powerful figures and desolate venerables, but there were also more than 1,000 heavenly Tao old monsters. There were even as many as 13 supreme great Tao-level experts of the primordial realm who had come. No one would believe that 3 of the 13 supreme prehistoric beings had perished in succession in less than 10 days since they'd arrived here. Moreover, only 10 supreme prehistoric beings had put on a strong front and fled hastily after uttering those ruthless words. Yi Xian did not chase after them. No, it was not that he did not have the ability, but that there was no need at all. Otherwise, this group of old monsters would have continuously torn open a crack in the void to escape. After all, it took more than 10 breaths of time for them to all leave. With Yi Xian's current terrifying cultivation and strength, if he were to take action, he would not dare to say that he could make all of them stay, but he could definitely make a portion of them stay. None. Whether it was the 10 grand mist old monsters who escaped first or the more than 1,000 heavenly Tao old monsters, all of them were the same. Until, with Yi Xian's current cultivation level and height, those grand mist old monsters and desolate venerables who had retreated to an extremely distant void that was tens of billions of miles away could not be aroused any interest in paying attention to them. The reason why he did not chase after them was that although these old monsters had escaped, to Yi Xian, the result was that the monk could not leave the temple. The left bank of the Milky Way was so small. With his current cultivation and strength, a terrifying existence of the 4th stage grand mist old monsters could travel from the left end of the left bank of the Milky Way to the right end of the left bank of the Milky Way in half a month's time. Perhaps some of these grand mist old monsters and heavenly Tao old monsters would escape to the parallel void to lie low for a while, but that did not matter. Because the time for the Milky Way star domain to open was about to come. They could not hide in the parallel void forever. In the face of the opening of the Milky Way star domain, even the grand mist old monsters could not resist the temptation. They had actually gathered on the left bank of the Milky Way, and built the strongest forbidden lands and strongest star domains. They had spent countless years waiting for the opening of the Milky Way star domain, so that they could enter and fight for the fate of the next era of grand mist. While, as long as this group of old monsters appeared with Yi Xian's terrifying cultivation level, which was definitely the number 1 person in grand mist on both sides of the Milky Way, as long as they met, he would definitely be able to kill them. Chapter 5166. When the battle ended, all the fierce beast forbidden grounds from the left bank, the mighty figures of the abandoned star domain, the desolate supremes, the heavenly Tao old monsters, and even the 10 remaining supreme primordial masters from the left bank, all fled in panic. In this battle, Yi Xian had established an illustrious reputation for himself. Even 3 grand mist realm experts had been killed by him. In the entire vast and boundless primordial void, there was no doubt that he had leaped to become the number 1 person in the entire boundless primordial void. If Yi Xian could definitely shake the entire primordial void. No matter where he went, the void would shake. No one dared to provoke him. They could only retreat when they heard the news. But to Yi Xian, all of this was far from enough. After entering the primordial Tao realm, he had experienced this earth-shattering battle, and the speed of his transformation had been forcefully increased. However, even now, Yi Xian could only use the second transformation of the 9 transformations of the demonic ape bloodline ability. Since, in the state of the second transformation, his peak cultivation was at the 4th level of the primordial realm, which was the middle stage of this realm. From looking at the current situation of the primordial void, This fourth-level mid-stage primordial master was clearly enough. After all, the 10 remaining primordial masters were all only at the first level of the primordial master. However, in fact, Yi Xian was not confused by this appearance. Nor was he impetuous and arrogant because of it. He still felt a sense of urgency and pressure. First, when the 10 surviving old monsters of primordial chaos left in a hurry, someone once said that when they entered into closed-door cultivation after obtaining the 9 heavenly Tao elixir a million years ago, there were already some ancient old monsters of primordial chaos in the primordial chaos. Dong. At that time, these fellows were only at the peak of the 9th level of the heavenly Tao realm. Now, they had been in seclusion for a million years. With the help of the 9 heavenly Tao elixir, they came out one after another and finally broke through to the primordial realm, becoming supreme Tao realm experts. In that case, those old monsters who had already been at the primordial realm a million years ago were obviously even stronger in terms of cultivation. Such Asif the Nether Wolf, Dark Blood Blue Crocodile, and the other Grand Mystic Centrics that had appeared in the recent years were merely the second batch of supreme Grand Mystic Centrics in the primordial void. Then there was an even more ancient first batch of supreme Grand Mystic Centrics before them. That group of supreme Hongmeng was still hibernating and had yet to appear, but their cultivation bases were definitely not just at the first level of the Grand Mist realm. According to Yi Xian's deductions, there might not be any mid-stage Grand Mist realm cultivators at the 4th level or above, or even late-stage existences at this level. With Yi Xian's strength at the beginning of the 4th stage and entering the middle Hongmeng stage, he was indeed the number 1 expert in the Hongmeng void. However, once the first batch of old monsters who had stepped into the Grand Mist realm a million years ago appeared, he might not be able to keep his title as the most powerful person in the Grand Mist realm. Therefore, before this batch of old monsters appeared, Yi Xian had to raise his cultivation base to the next level. To the other Grand Mystic Centrics, this might only be an extravagant hope. Even if they wanted to, they might not have the strength to do so. However, to Yi Xian, this was not a difficult matter at all. He only needed to continue to temper himself through battles and greatly increase the speed of his transformation after stepping into the primordial Tao realm. Once the 3rd, 4th, and even 5th transformations arrived, Yi Xian's cultivation base and strength would soar by 1 level with each transformation. Boom! Rumble! Just as his expression was uncertain and these thoughts flashed through his mind and he fell into deep thought, an earth-shattering low rumble suddenly came from the end of the dark void far away. The momentum was too great. Even though there was an endless distance between them, Yi Xian could feel the primordial void around him trembling slightly. However, everything quickly fell into silence. Nothing else happened, as if the scene just now was just an illusion. What happened? A light flashed in Yi Xian's eyes as he muttered with a frown. Immediately after, his powerful divine sense, which was at the 4th level of Grand Mist, quickly extended towards the direction of the low rumbling sound. This. After a quick investigation, there was a result. Even Yi Xian gasped and subconsciously exclaimed, "It's actually... the Milky Way is throbbing?" Yes, it was indeed the Milky Way that was throbbing. Just now, this vast and boundless Milky Way, sandwiched between countless fierce beast forbidden lands and the remnant star field on both sides, clearly trembled as a whole. This feeling was like a pulse, as if the entire vast and boundless Milky Way was alive. It was as if its body had moved slightly during the tremor just now. Such a situation had never happened before, so there was no need to say what it meant. Very obviously, the Milky Way has recovered and is about to open. It seems that those heavenly Tao old monsters who just escaped in a panic not long ago, as well as the remaining 10 Grand Mist old monsters on the left bank, shouldn't be hiding in the parallel void at this time. After pondering for a while, the corners of Yi Xian's mouth outlined a rather playful smile. He murmured softly like he was sleep-talking. These old guys are dormant in the fierce beast forbidden lands and the remnant star field on the left bank of the Milky Way. Their only purpose is to wait for the opening of the Milky Way. Now that this vast Milky Way has suddenly trembled, it means that the time for the Milky Way to open is coming, and it may appear at any time. In this case, even if there is a strong crisis, they must stay in the Forbidden Lands and the remnant star field on the left bank. It is impossible for them to hide in the parallel void. Otherwise, if they miss the opportunity to enter the Milky Way to compete for the next era's primordial fortune, their endless years of waiting will be in vain. Whoosh! As these thoughts flashed through his mind, Yi Xian was overjoyed. Without hesitation, he shook his shoulders and turned into a ray of light that shot toward the left bank of the Milky Way. He wanted to continue the battle and push forward the transformation process of his divine soul and physical body after entering the primordial chaos Tao realm. Now, he could make the third transformation of the 9 demonic ape transformations bloodline as soon as possible. Once the third transformation arrived, his cultivation base and strength would soar again, from the current 4th level of primordial chaos Tao realm to the 5th level of primordial chaos Tao realm. For the current Yi Xian, this kind of battle tempering would not end in a short time. He would continue to fight, and his cultivation base would rapidly advance from the 4th level of primordial chaos Tao realm to the 5th level, the 6th level, and even the 7th level of late-stage primordial chaos Tao realm. Of course, the heavenly Tao's old monster was no longer of much use to him if he wanted to achieve such an effect. He was going to the left bank in search of the 10 remaining primordial chaos eccentrics on the left bank. The left bank of the Milky Way, the Swan Forbidden Grounds. The strongest person in the Swan Forbidden Grounds was originally just a heavenly Tao ferocious bird with an ordinary bloodline. However, in fact, there was an ancient peak heavenly Tao old monster in this Forbidden Grounds who had entered seclusion a million years ago with enough 9 heavenly Tao elixir. This old guy was a scarlet blood swan. He had broken through and was one of the 13 supreme Grand Mist old monsters that had appeared on the left bank of the Milky Way in recent years. In the shocking battle in the endless dark void in front of the left bank, this scarlet blood swan had also participated. Moreover, it had not been killed by Yi Xian and had become one of the 10 Grand Mist old monsters that had survived but had fled in a hurry. After returning to the Swan Forbidden Grounds, this scarlet blood swan immediately wanted to enter the parallel void to seek refuge. The reason why it had waited until after returning to the Swan Forbidden Grounds to enter the parallel void was that it was not so easy to find and build a stable and secret passage to connect the parallel void. It was likely that even if one found a weak node of the primordial void in other areas and was able to enter the parallel void, it would be very difficult to return smoothly. It was possible that one would be lost and unable to find the way back. In the end, it was equivalent to exiling oneself into the endless primordial void. Therefore, whether it was the Grand Mist old monster or the heavenly Tao old monster, the stable entrance to a safe parallel void that they built was fixed and credible. Basically, it was in the depths of the ferocious beast Forbidden Grounds or the remnant star field that they controlled. Boom! Rumble! Just as the scarlet blood swan returned to the Swan Forbidden Land and was about to enter the stable parallel space it had constructed, the entire Swan Forbidden Land suddenly trembled violently. In the dark space outside the Forbidden Land, there was even an unprecedentedly powerful low rumbling sound that boomed over. It was him. His body shook, and when he turned around to look, his powerful divine sense instantly extended out. As soon as he probed, he cried out involuntarily, "What? It's actually the Milky Way." As soon as these words left his mouth, the scarlet blood swan immediately fell into deep thought, his face full of confusion. He wanted to enter the parallel void to take refuge, but now this vast galaxy suddenly throbbed for an unprecedented moment, and he naturally knew what it meant. Silver. The moment when the Milky Way opened could come at any time, and he couldn't miss it. In the end, the scarlet blood swan's eyes flashed, and he gave up on the idea of hiding in the parallel void. He comforted himself that the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, might not necessarily chase after him. That is, even if he did, he might not necessarily target him. After all, there were 10 Grand Mist old monsters who had escaped earlier. Similar scenes were happening in some of the other Forbidden Grounds and star fields on the left bank. There were 9 such Forbidden Grounds and star fields. In other words, the 10 Grand Mist old monsters who had escaped from the boundless dark void in front of the left bank all chose not to hide in the parallel void under the temptation of the Milky Way opening at any time. In their hearts, they all held a fluke in their hearts and stayed in the Forbidden Grounds and star fields that they controlled, eagerly waiting for the Milky Way star field to open. Hiss! At this moment, when the scarlet blood swan rushed into the interior of the star where his cave dwelling was located, an incomparably clear sound of ripping silk came from the dark void of the Forbidden Grounds not far from here. Turning around, In the direction of the sound of ripping cloth, a spatial crack could be seen. A figure walked out from it with a body of tens of thousands of kilometers. Other than the Demon Palace Master Yi Xian, who else could it be? At this moment, with the arrival of Yi Xian, the terrifying pressure of a mid-level Grand Mist Old Monster spread out, instantly causing the entire Swan Forbidden Grounds to fall silent. Countless ferocious beasts in the Forbidden Grounds all prostrated on the ground, trembling. Even the Heavenly Dao Old Monsters were like this. Previously, in the vast void in front of the left bank, they were incomparably terrified when they watched the battle from hundreds of millions of miles away. Now that they felt the terrifying pressure of Yi Xian's mid-level Grand Mist Old Monster at such a close distance, one could imagine how deeply they felt. Screech! Suddenly seeing Yi Xian, the scarlet blood swan's body trembled violently. It raised its head and let out a shocking screech, wanting to escape into the parallel void. It's too late. Seeing this scene, Yi Xian's incomparably cold voice came from the mouth of the ferocious ape, who was millions of miles in size. Then his figure flashed, and he instantly charged toward the star in front of him. Boom! Under the punch, the scarlet blood swan's cave-dwelling star was directly blasted apart, and the old fellow who was trying to escape into the parallel void fell out halfway. Very quickly. Soon, the ferocious ape had already closed in. The pressure emitted from its body locked onto the old man's chi, forcefully pulling him into an earth-shattering battle. The energy was too violent, and the void was collapsing rapidly. The scene of the battle could not be seen, and only a vast expanse of chaotic stars could be seen. Rumble! Bang! After half an incense stick of time, an earth-shattering rumble sounded without any suspense. A cold light flashed in the eyes of the ferocious ape, and he immediately threw out a punch. This punch was Yi Xian's full-strength attack. The scarlet blood swan, who had always wanted to escape, could not dodge at all. He instantly encountered an ominous situation, and his body was completely blown up, turning into a cloud of blood mist that spread out. This incomparably powerful Grand Mist Old Monster, after a short battle of half an incense stick of time, faced the final full-strength attack, and exploded into a cloud of blood mist amidst the incomparably violent remnant force. Huff! When the blood mist formed by the explosion of his body spread out, the ferocious ape had already waved his hand at the first moment. The howling of the wind resounded, and an incomparably majestic invisible force whistled out. The boundless blood mist that was spreading around the void was immediately swept over. He directly sent it into the bottom of the central region volcano in the cauldron space, and began the blood essence condensation. In addition, at the same time, there was also some compressed Heavenly Dao origin liquid, some Heavenly 9 Great Dao treasure liquid, and some top-grade cultivation resources that even the Heavenly Dao Old Monster might not be able to obtain. These were originally the most precious cultivation resources in the hands of the Scarlet Blood Swan, but now, with his death, they all fell into the hands of Yi Xian. It could be considered an additional gain, and it was not cheap. It was all absorbed into Yi Xian's body. After doing all this, Yi Xian immediately felt the changes in his body. He immediately frowned and subconsciously muttered to himself, as if he was sleep-talking, but there was an endless chill in his voice. It's still not enough. It seems that just one Grand Mist Old Monster is not enough of a challenge. Hiss! As soon as he finished speaking, he directly tore through the void and left. Fire Elephant Forbidden Land. The old monster of primordial chaos was a crimson glaze fire elephant that was overseeing this forbidden area. He had originally planned to enter the parallel void to seek refuge, but in the end, he made the same choice as the Scarlet Blood Swan and stayed in the Fire Elephant Forbidden Land. In fact, his luck was as bad as that of the Scarlet Blood Swan, because after killing the Scarlet Blood Swan, Yi Xian rushed over here. This glass fire elephant was the 5th Grand Mist Old Monster that Yi Xian had set his eyes on, calculating the time. It only took Yi Xian half a day to rush from the Swan Forbidden Land to the Fire Elephant Forbidden Land. In such a short time, Yi Xian had rushed over from the Swan Forbidden Land, so everything that happened there had not yet spread. At this moment, the glazed fire elephant was resting in its cave star, but it seemed to have suddenly sensed something and suddenly opened its eyes. Hiss! Almost at the same time, in the dark void of the Forbidden Land not far from the glass fire elephant cave star, there was an incomparably clear sound of ripping silk. Looking in the direction of the sound of ripping silk, a void crack could be seen. A figure darted out from this void crack. It was thousands of miles long. It was the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, who he had just seen half a day ago. Roar! Seeing Yi Xian's arrival, the glass fire elephant's body shook violently, and its hair stood on end. It raised its head and let out a shocking roar. It was summoning all the heavenly Tao old monsters in the Forbidden Land, wanting them to block for it for a moment and buy time to escape. But in reality, in the face of its summons, the entire fire elephant Forbidden Land was like a dead zone. There was not the slightest response. In the next moment, as Yi Xian arrived, the terrifying pressure of a fourth-stage Grand Mist old monster spread out, instantly silencing the entire Swan Forbidden Land. Although there were dozens of heavenly Tao old monsters in the Forbidden Land, without exception, all of them were prostrating on the ground, trembling. Who would dare to come forward to die? Hiss! This result made the glazed fire elephant seethe with anger. It raised its head and let out another roar. With a swing of its huge trunk, it smashed the cave star beneath it into pieces. Then, it turned around and tried to take advantage of this chaos to flee. Boom! But, unfortunately, Yi Xian's oppressive aura had already enveloped and locked onto his body. Without the slightest hesitation, a cold light flashed in the eyes of the violent ape, and in an instant, it arrived behind the glazed fire elephant. It did not launch a fatal attack, but instead, it did not use any divine abilities or treasures. It only relied on its physical body to engage in close combat with the glazed fire elephant. Because only in this way would it be the most beneficial and most effective for him to promote the transformation of his divine soul and physical body. The chi was too chaotic. This chaotic battle was earth-shattering, but it did not last for too long. Same as, after the time it takes for half an incense stick to burn, everything came to an end. As expected, the glass fire elephant was killed. In the form of a violent ape, Yi Xian, who was tens of thousands of kilometers tall, walked out from the chaotic and berserk energy. However, the expression on his face wasn't happy. Could even be said that it was a little gloomy. This was the fifth old monster of primordial chaos he had killed. Even if the first three old monsters of primordial chaos were not included, he had killed 2 old monsters of primordial chaos in succession this time. However, the result made him quite depressed. Although the transformation of his divine soul and physical body had been promoted to a certain extent, it had not reached the level where he could smoothly display the third transformation of the demon ape. It's not enough. I have to continue hunting. Hiss! As he muttered to himself, Yi Xian waved his hand and tore open a spatial rift. He took a step forward and entered it. His entire body disappeared in an instant as he headed to his next destination. There, the 6th Grand Mist old monster would fall at his hands. Green Firmament Star Area. It was not a supreme forbidden area ruled by fierce beasts, but a remnant of the star area controlled by the survivors. Apart from Yi Xian, there were both survivors and fierce beasts among the 13 old monsters of primordial chaos that had appeared on the left bank in recent years. While, in this firmament star area, there happened to be one of the survivors of primordial chaos. This old monster of primordial chaos called himself Ancestor Green Firmament, and his cultivation base was only at the first stage of primordial chaos. This Ancestor Green Firmament had also planned to enter a parallel void and lie low after escaping from the vast and endless dark void in front of the left bank. But it had to be said that Yi Xian was really lucky this time. At this critical moment, the vast Milky Way that had not throbbed before suddenly throbbed as a whole. It was this unexpected throbbing that made the 10 Grand Mist old monsters change their minds. None of them entered the parallel void to seek refuge. Instead, they stayed in the most powerful forbidden areas and most powerful star regions under their control, waiting for the opening of the Milky Way star region that could come at any time. However, this was not the case. Unfortunately, Ancestor Green Firmament, the old monster of primordial chaos in the firmament star area, was obviously like the scarlet blood swan and the glaze fire elephant that Yi Xian had killed. Before the opening of the Milky Way star area, monstrous killing intent had already descended. Hiss! An incomparably crisp sound of ripping cloth rang out. In the depths of the firmament star area, a deep void crack suddenly appeared. A huge figure that was tens of thousands of miles long walked out of this void crack, full of killing intent. It was the glazed fire elephant that had just left the fire elephant forbidden area half a day ago. Yi Xian had never had much interest in hunting the survivors, at least not as much as hunting the fierce beasts. But this firmament star area was the closest to the fire elephant forbidden area, where the old monsters of primordial chaos were guarding. And Yi Xian's purpose was only to find the old monsters of primordial chaos to fight, and to push forward the transformation process of his divine soul and physical body after suddenly reaching the primordial chaos realm. Therefore, it really did not make much difference whether the target was the fierce beasts or the survivors. So, Yi Xian had come. Hiss! Following his arrival, the entire firmament star area fell silent. All the survivors of the star area did not dare to breathe loudly, but that old ancestor green firmament did not hesitate at all. He raised his head and let out an incomparably shrill roar, wanting to escape at the first moment. A cold light flashed in the ape's eyes, and he instantly locked onto the old ancestor green firmament. After approaching him, he immediately shrunk his body to only about 10 feet tall, and began a shocking hand-to-hand battle with the old ancestor green firmament. Rumble. Bang! After the time it took for an incense stick to burn, an earth-shattering roar rang out without any suspense. Green firmament Old ancestor green firmament had long been seriously injured, and basically had no battle strength left. To Yi Xian, it was equivalent to losing his value. Moreover, when Yi Xian's attack slowed down slightly, the old man turned around and tried to escape. No. With some hesitation, Yi Xian directly used teleportation and appeared behind the old ancestor green firmament in the blink of an eye. Old ancestor green firmament, who was trying to escape, had no chance of survival at all. He instantly encountered an inauspicious situation, and his physical body was completely blown up, turning into a cloud of blood mist that spread out. Whoosh! The sound of the wind whistling resounded, and an incomparably majestic invisible force whistled out. Not yet, when the blood mist formed by the explosion of his physical body spread out, the ape had already waved his hand at the first moment. The majestic blood mist that was spreading in the void was quickly swept over and directly sent into the bottom of the central region volcano in the cauldron space, and then put it away. Although this was only a remnant powerhouse, and his vitality was not rich enough, the majestic blood mist formed by the explosion of his physical body could not be refined into a primordial blood essence. However, this was a primordial blood mist after all. It was very beneficial to the ferocious beast generals under Yi Xian, so it naturally could not be wasted. This was already the 6th primordial chaos old monster that Yi Xian had killed. Nearly half of the 13 primordial chaos old monsters that had appeared in recent years had been killed by him. It was really too shocking. As long as the news spread out, the entire left bank of the Milky Way would definitely tremble in fear. After old ancestor green firmament was killed, nearly half of the 13 primordial chaos old monsters that had appeared in recent years on the left bank of the Milky Way had been killed by him, a total of 6 of them. It was really too shocking. As long as the news spread out, the entire left bank of the Milky Way would definitely tremble in fear. Before these 6 primordial chaos old monsters, 3 of them had been killed in the vast dark area in front of the left bank. The remaining 3 were continuously killed by Yi Xian in the past day or so. The news had not spread yet, but once the news of him entering the left bank of the Milky Way and hunting down the 10 primordial chaos old monsters that had escaped spread, the remaining 7 primordial chaos old monsters that were still alive would very likely escape. Of course, now that this vast and boundless Milky Way was throbbing like never before, the moment of opening could come at any time. Even if the news of Yi Xian entering the left bank to hunt down the primordial chaos old monsters spread, the 7 old fellows who were still alive would not be able to hide in the parallel void out of fear. That was contrary to their ultimate goal of staying dormant on the left bank of the Milky Way for countless years. No one would make such a choice. However, even if they did not hide in the parallel void, They could still walk out of the most powerful forbidden areas and star regions under their control, and Yi Xian would not be able to find them. This was exactly what Yi Xian was worried about. Previously, he had already killed 3 primordial chaos old monsters in a row, but the third change still had not arrived. This made Yi Xian a little anxious. If the remaining 7 primordial chaos old monsters all escaped and he could not find them, Yi Xian would probably be depressed to death. Therefore, after killing Ancestor Green Firmament, he did not hesitate at all. He immediately tore through the void and rushed to his next target. His next target was not the Remnant Star region, but a fierce beast forbidden area called the Magic Dragon Forbidden Area. Previously, there was not a single magic dragon in the Magic Dragon Forbidden Area. But just 2 years ago, the black gold magic dragon that had been in seclusion for millions of years in the Magic Dragon Forbidden Area came out and successfully broke through to the primordial chaos old monster, becoming an incomparably powerful primordial chaos old monster. From then on, the Magic Dragon Forbidden Area lived up to its name. The black gold magic dragon, was Yi Xian's next target. The Magic Dragon Forbidden Area. Hiss! An incomparably crisp sound of ripping cloth rang out, and a deep void crack suddenly appeared in the depths of the Magic Dragon Forbidden Area. A huge figure that was millions of miles long walked out of the void crack with a murderous aura. It was none other than Bao Yuan, who had just left the Green Firmament Star region half a day ago. As soon as this figure appeared, the entire Devil Dragon Forbidden Area fell silent in an instant. All the ferocious beasts in the Forbidden Area held their breaths as they opened their eyes wide in astonishment. Then, a figure emerged from a huge abandoned star several 100 million miles to the right of the void crack. It was none other than the strongest person in the Magic Dragon Forbidden Area, the black gold magic dragon with a cultivation base of first-order primordial chaos old monster. Although the black gold magic dragon's cultivation base was only at first-order primordial chaos old monster, he was one of the stronger existences among the 13 old monsters of primordial chaos that had appeared on the left bank in recent years. He was not too far away from first-order primordial chaos old monster. Not to mention, he also had an extremely powerful bloodline secret technique. Although he was able to activate such a powerful bloodline secret technique, it was absolutely impossible for him to be a match for Yi Xian, who had already reached the middle stage of the Grand Mist Realm. However, in the Black Gold Magic Dragon's opinion, even if he could not defeat the Master of Magic Hall, Yi Xian, with his powerful bloodline secret method as a trump card, it should not be too big of a problem for him to protect his life. Therefore, although he was also surprised to see Yi Xian suddenly appear, his reaction was completely different. When Yi Xian had killed the Scarlet Blood Swan, the Glaze Fire Elephant, and Ancestor Green Firmament, the first reaction of the 3 old guys was to turn tail and run as soon as they saw Yi Xian, the Master of Magic Hall. However, now in this Magic Dragon Forbidden Land, the strongest person guarding this place, the Black Gold Magic Dragon, did not immediately escape. Of course, even if he escaped, it was impossible for him to succeed. Regarding this, the Black Gold Magic Dragon was obviously well aware. Instead of showing fear and running away, in his opinion, it was better to use his strongest trump card and let the Master of Magic Hall, Yi Xian, realize that it was difficult for him to kill him, and retreat in the face of difficulties. Boom! Rumble! Roar! Hundreds of millions of miles in front of the void, an earth-shattering roar suddenly sounded. The incomparably huge cave mansion star under the Black Gold Magic Dragon suddenly exploded. Following that, countless pieces of rubble formed by the explosion of the star flew everywhere. After the earth-shattering rumble of thunder, it was followed by an incomparably loud dragon roar. This incomparably huge figure soared into the sky, and it was 50 million miles long. This was a black dragon. Its entire body was pitch black, but the countless dragon scales on its body were all bursting with a bright black light, like black gold, extremely dazzling. Master of Magic Hall, Yi Xian? At the same time, the Black Gold Magic Dragon's divine sense voice also sounded, revealing an endless sense of pressure. Although it was dignified, there was not much fear. Although you are strong, and this king is no match for you, but it is not possible to kill this king today. I advise you to leave as soon as possible. Don't waste your energy. After struggling for a while, in the end, you will return empty-handed. It seems that you are quite confident. This is good. Finally, I have met a prey that I can fight to my heart's content. At this scene, listening to the words of the black gold magic dragon, a look of anticipation appeared on the face of the violent ape. When the divine sense voice came out, the corners of his mouth outlined a very playful smile. Now, let's see if you can take this king's blow. Rumble. Before the voice fell, the figure of the violent ape had already rushed out. Still, he did not use any magical power or any kind of supreme treasure. He only threw out a simple punch. Hum. The next moment, an incomparably low buzzing sound suddenly sounded in the void, revealing an extremely mysterious aura of pressure. Because of this, endless waves of fine scales appeared in the void. The black gold demonic dragon's eyes flashed with a dark light, and it suddenly closed its eyes at this moment. The space within a 10 billion kilometer radius was plunged into complete darkness. Not only did it affect one's vision, but even the probing of one's divine sense was pitch black, as if there was nothing there. Everything within this 10 billion kilometer radius had vanished into nothingness. This was the black gold magic dragon's most powerful bloodline magical power, dark and bright. Demon, this unique magical power of the dragon bloodline was extremely powerful and had a special effect. When the black gold magic dragon used it and closed its eyes, the world fell into darkness. When it opened its eyes again, the day would come again very quickly. When Yi Xian's fist smashed over, the black gold demon dragon in front of him had already opened its eyes, and everything returned to normal. As for the violent ape's violent punch, it directly pierced through the black gold demon dragon's enormous body, turning it into a bubble that collapsed and disappeared without a trace. In the blink of an eye, the body of the black gold magic dragon had changed its position, causing Yi Xian's punch to miss completely. Chapter 5167. Boom! Walala! Yi Xian threw a punch, and the black gold demonic dragon suddenly opened its eyes. In the air, everything instantly returned to normal. However, when Yi Xian's berserk punch pierced through the black gold demon dragon's enormous body, a strange crashing sound rang out. The black gold demonic dragon's body turned into a bubble, collapsed, and disappeared. This was not his real body at all. In the blink of an eye, the black gold demonic dragon's body had changed its position, causing Yi Xian's punch to miss. Peace of mind? In the time it takes to close his eyes, everything has been changed in an instant. This is rather interesting. Look at this. Seeing this, Bao Yuan stopped moving. When Yi Xian's voice came out of his mouth, he subconsciously looked to the right. In that direction, a billion miles away, the void was originally empty. However, at this moment, an illusory figure appeared. It was the black gold demonic dragon. Don't waste any more time. This is the strongest ability of the demonic dragon clan. Although you are strong and I can't do anything to you, you can't do anything to me either. If you can't attack me, then no matter how strong your power is, what's the point? As soon as his figure appeared, the black gold demonic dragon's mouth curved into a smug smile. His voice came out with a hint of mockery. Before this attack, he was still a little nervous, but after seeing the effect, he was confident that he was in an invincible position. No matter how strong the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, was, even if he couldn't do anything to him, the other party couldn't kill him either. So what was there to be afraid of? That is, even if the other party is unwilling, he will at most try a few more times. After confirming that there is no other way, he will leave in the end. If it was anyone else, then perhaps you might really return empty-handed today. But unfortunately, you've encountered me today. Seeing the black gold demonic dragon's smug expression, Yi Xian curled his lips and said again, "Isn't it just the demonic dragon clan's peace of mind? You speak as if I don't know." Hum. In the next moment, the black gold dragon scale suspended in the air above Yi Xian's sea of consciousness suddenly began to spin at an extreme speed, radiating a brilliant light. A dazzling black light spread out from Bao Yuan's body. In the blink of an eye, it appeared behind Bao Yuan. It was also a black gold demonic dragon. Although it was just an energy body, its eyes sparkled with a mysterious power. It directly cancelled out the power of the black gold demonic dragon in the void on the right. This this, 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 this. Everything happened so suddenly that it was beyond everyone's expectations. The black gold demonic dragon's body shook violently as he gasped in shock. The demonic dragon's bloodline? This is impossible. At this moment, he realized that he was in grave danger. How could he deal with the master of the magic hall, Yi Xian, now that his mystic dragon bloodline had lost its effect? Brain as these thoughts flashed through his mind, the black gold demonic dragon suddenly lost all his fighting spirit. Without hesitation, he turned around and tried to escape. You only want to escape now? Don't you think it's too late? I haven't had my fill yet. Boom! Yi Xian's divine sense voice rang out. At the same time as he punched out, the terrifying aura of a fourth-order mid-stage grand mist instantly enveloped and locked the black gold demonic dragon's body. In the blink of an eye, Bao Yuan was already close to the black gold demonic dragon. An earth-shattering hand-to-hand battle thus began. Screech! In just half an incense stick's worth of time, the black gold demon dragon was unable to hold on any longer. It raised its head and let out a heaven-shaking roar, followed by a demonic dragon swinging its tail. At the same time, it pushed Yi Xian's figure away. Without any hesitation, it turned around and fled into the distance. Fang's battle strength had already declined to the extreme and was about to be exhausted. To Yi Xian, the black gold demonic dragon had lost its value. Boom! Rumble! Bang! As these thoughts flashed through his mind, the violent ape no longer hesitated. A cold light flashed in his eyes as he directly teleported behind him. The moment he threw out a punch, an earth-shattering rumbling sound rang out without any suspense. Facing Yi Xian's full-powered punch, the black gold demonic dragon, who was trying to escape, had no chance of survival at all. In an instant, he met with an inauspicious fate, and his body was completely blown up, turning into a cloud of blood mist that spread out. Huff! The howling of the wind resounded, and an incomparably majestic formless chi whistled out. Before the blood mist formed by the explosion of his body could spread out, Bao Yuan had already waved his hand. The boundless blood mist that was spreading in the air was quickly swept over and sent directly into the bottom of the central region volcano in the cauldron space, where the blood essence condensation began. At the same time, rays of light shot out. They were the heavenly 9 Great Tao treasure liquid, the heavenly Tao origin liquid, and other top-grade cultivation resources in the black gold demonic dragon's body. Now, all of them were taken advantage of by Yi Xian, becoming his additional spoils of war. After half an incense stick's worth of time, the earth-shattering battle ended. In the air, the berserk energy was still wreaking havoc. Yi Xian, who was in the form of a violent ape with a body of tens of thousands of kilometers, had already walked out of the chaotic battlefield. Bao Yuan's face was brimming with an incomparably joyful smile. The cultivation aura that exuded from his body was completely different from before. It was much more powerful than before. This could be said to have not come easy. After this hunt began, Yi Xian fought a shocking bloody battle with the 4 Grand Mist Old monsters and killed all of them. Only then did he finally allow the transformation of his soul sea and body after stepping into the Grand Mist realm to rise to a new height under the full force of his full strength. Now, he could finally successfully display the 3rd transformation of the 9 Devil Ape transformation. Of course, the current Yi Xian's true cultivation was still only at the 1st level of the Grand Mist realm. However, after activating the 9 transformations of the demonic ape, his cultivation would reach the 2nd level of the Grand Mist realm. The 1st transformation was the Grand Mist realm 3rd level. Previously, he could already display the 2nd transformation, so his peak cultivation realm was at the Grand Mist realm 4th level, which was the beginning of the intermediate stage. But now, after the end of this battle, Yi Xian had successfully used the 9 transformations of the demonic ape's bloodline ability to the 3rd transformation. As a result, his cultivation had also increased by another level. In other words, the current him was already a supreme existence at the 5th step of the Grand Mist realm. Of the 13 Grand Mist Old monsters that had appeared on the left bank of the Milky Way in recent years, 7 of them had been killed by him after the black gold demonic dragon had perished. Only 6 of them had survived, which was less than half of them. The third transformation, the Grand Mist Realm 5th level? It's still not enough. While muttering, Yi Xian, who was in the form of a violent ape, subconsciously clenched his fists. Without hesitation, he waved his hand and directly tore open a crack in the void. He stepped into it, and his huge figure disappeared in the blink of an eye. Next, he would go to a remnant star field and kill the 8th of the 13 Grand Mist Old Monsters on the left bank of the Milky Way. Boom! After killing the Black Gold Demon Dragon, the transformation of Yi Xian's divine soul and physical body after breaking through to the Grand Mist Realm was once again pushed to a higher level. He successfully executed the 9 transformations of the demonic ape's bloodline ability to the 3rd transformation. As a result, his peak cultivation base had increased by a level. He had risen from the 4th level of the Grand Mist Realm to the 5th level of the Grand Mist Realm. Hong the Grand Mist Realm 5th level was firmly at the intermediate stage of the Grand Mist Realm, but it was still insufficient for Yi Xian. Test considering that the first batch of Grand Mist Old Monsters who had stepped into the Grand Mist Realm a million years ago was very likely to be at the advanced stage of the Grand Mist Realm, Yi Xian's goal this time was to push the transformation of his divine soul and physical body to the 5th transformation after breaking through to the Grand Mist Realm. Under the 5th transformation of the 9 Devil Ape Transformations bloodline ability, he would possess the battle prowess of a Grand Mist Level 7 expert. Generation. Even if the first batch of Grand Mist Old Monsters who had stepped into the Grand Mist Realm a million years ago included the 8th group of Grand Mist Old Monsters, Yi Xian's situation wasn't so difficult that he couldn't deal with them. Now, he was at the 3rd transformation, the 5th stage of the Grand Mist Realm. If he wanted to push the transformation of his divine soul and physical body to the 5th transformation and attain the advanced stage of the Grand Mist Realm 7th level, Yi Xian still needed to undergo 2 more transformations. Moreover, there were still 6 Grand Mist Old Monsters waiting for him to kill. According to Yi Xian's estimations, after continuing to engage in a heaven-shaking battle with these 6 Grand Mist Old Monsters, he should be able to achieve his goal of experiencing 2 more changes on his current foundation. With this thought in mind, he immediately left the Demon Dragon Forbidden Land and tore open a crack in space, leaving for his next target, the Flourishing Flower Starfield. The Flourishing Flower Starfield was a powerful remnant starfield in the middle section of the left bank, ranked 3rd on the remnant starfield list. Just the Heavenly Tao Old Monsters alone numbered more than 50. Just over 2 years ago, the ancestor of the Flourishing Flower Starfield, Old Monster Magnificent Heaven, finally broke through and came out of seclusion, becoming one of the 13 Grand Mist Old Monsters who had emerged in recent years. Now, Yi Xian was heading to the Flourishing Flower Starfield to hunt this Old Monster Magnificent Heaven. Dang! However, Yi Xian's real purpose was not to hunt down this Old Monster Magnificent Heaven. His real purpose was to find this Old Monster Magnificent Heaven and fight him to his heart's content, pushing forward the transformation of his divine soul and physical body after breaking through to the Grand Mist Realm as much as possible. This after the battle began, when Old Monster Magnificent Heaven was seriously injured and unable to fight. Yi Xian would use the final thunderous means to kill him in one fell swoop and then rush to the next destination. Flourishing Flower Starfield. Hiss! With a crisp sound of ripping cloth, a deep void crack suddenly appeared in the depths of the Flourishing Flower Starfield. From this void crack, a giant figure of 10 million kilometers in size walked out, emitting a murderous aura. It was none other than Yi Xian, who had just left the Demon Dragon Realm half a day ago. As soon as he arrived, Bao Yuan's eyes flashed with a cold light and his aura instantly locked onto his target. At the same time, his originally 10 million kilometers in size immediately shrunk to only a few meters in size. After all, Old Monster Shangtian was a survivor of the primordial era, and his figure was no different from a human expert. If Yi Xian wanted to engage in a heaven-shaking melee battle with him, his fists would land on his flesh. His enormous figure that was tens of thousands of kilometers long was obviously not suitable. He had to shrink to match his opponent's size. The master of the magic hall, Yi Xian? At this moment, with the arrival of Yi Xian, the entire green firmament starfield fell silent. All the survivors and masters in the starfield widened their eyes and gasped, their bodies trembling uncontrollably. While at this moment, Old Monster Magnificent Heaven, who was in a giant abandoned star, did not hesitate to raise his head and let out an incomparably mournful roar after realizing the arrival of the murderous aura. A dark light flashed in his eyes as he immediately tried to escape. This king has come from afar, but you are leaving as soon as you see me. Isn't that a bit too unkind? Whoosh! Yi Xian's eyes flashed with a cold light when he saw this scene, accompanied by an incomparably weak sound of something breaking through the air. His figure instantly disappeared from the spot as he teleported to the side of old monster Shang Tian. Come, come, come. Let's fight for 300 rounds. Boom! As soon as he finished speaking, Yi Xian had already punched out. Old monster Magnificent Heaven dodged in horror, but his body was still scraped by the attack, causing him to become impatient. Startled, the bloody battle of the heavens began. Unfortunately, this battle only lasted for about half an incense stick's worth of time before an earth-shattering roar sounded without any suspense. Even though old monster Magnificent Heaven had used all his skills and used all kinds of methods and treasures, he was still far from being a match for Yi Xian. In just half an incense stick's worth of time, he was already seriously injured. Seriously injured after being injured, he basically had no combat power left, which was equivalent to losing his value to Yi Xian. In this case, there was no need to continue this battle, otherwise it would be a waste of time. When these thoughts flashed through his mind, Yi Xian could not help but be a little excited, and his attacks also subconsciously slowed down slightly. It was at this moment that this old man felt that he had caught a glimpse of an opportunity, so without any hesitation, he turned around and tried to escape at this time. You still want to struggle? What's the point? Rumble? Bang! After some hesitation, Yi Xian directly used teleportation and appeared behind Old Monster Magnificent Heaven in the blink of an eye. Old Monster Magnificent Heaven, who was desperately trying to escape, was scared out of his wits, but there was nothing he could do. He could only watch as Bao Yuan, who had a cold look in his eyes, punched him in the chest. When this punch landed, Old Monster Magnificent Heaven instantly encountered an inauspicious situation. His body was completely blown apart, turning into a cloud of blood mist that spread out. It was at this moment that the whistling sound of violent winds resounded, and an incomparably majestic and invisible force whistled out. Before the bloody mist formed by the explosion of old monster Shang Tian's body could spread out, Bao Yuan had already waved his hand at the first possible moment. In the blink of an eye, in an instant, the blood mist that was spreading out in the void was swept over by Yi Xian and sent into the bottom of the volcano in the central region of the space inside the cauldron. At the same time, he also put away a storage magic treasure, which contained Old Monster Magnificent Heaven's 9 Great Dao Treasure Liquid, as well as the Heavenly Dao Origin Liquid and other top cultivation resources. This was already the 8th Old Monster of Grand Mist that Yi Xian had killed on the left bank of the Milky Way. More than half of the 13 Old Monsters of Grand Mist that had appeared on the left bank in recent years had fallen, and only 5 remained. And among the 5 surviving Old Monsters of Grand Mist, the one closest to the Shanghua starfield was the primordial Azura of the Azura Forbidden Grounds. Including Old Monster Magnificent Heaven, this primordial Azura would be the 9th Old Monster of Grand Mist to fall at the hands of Yi Xian. Hiss! After killing Old Monster Magnificent Heaven, a cold light flashed in Bao Yuan's eyes. He didn't waste any more time and directly tore open a crack in space. With a shake of his shoulder, he instantly flashed into the crack and disappeared in the blink of an eye. At the beginning of the primordial era, 3,000 Chaos Fiend gods would be born from the 3,000 nests and fill the void. Some of the Chaos Demon gods had the strength of the primordial realm as soon as they were born. They were also known as the Chaos Seeds. They were the hope that the primordial void would carry out again and again in order to find the lost lotus seed and peek into the supreme chaos after the primordial void. This kind of primordial era had probably been experienced countless times. Every time, a different 3,000 Chaos Demon gods would be born. Every time, the 3,000 Chaos Fiend gods that were born after the beginning of the primordial era would open up worlds of varying sizes outside the boundless primordial world and the dark void after they were born. These worlds of different sizes were nurturing different life forms, searching for the supreme chaos after the primordial void. The primordial Azura came from a great world where demons rushed into the sky. It was said that the bloodline of the primordial Yaksha also came from there. Although he had become the second man-made heavenly Tao of the great desolate world, which was the general under the headless infant corpse, he had already reached the peak of the desolate realm countless years ago. However, in fact, the primordial Yaksha was not a native creature of the great desolate world. He was an outsider. Countless years ago, for some reason, he had wandered into the great desolate world. Yi Xian did not know all of this. However, not long ago, when he saw the primordial Azura appear in the vast and endless dark void in front of the left bank, Yi Xian was almost stunned on the spot. At that moment, he thought that the primordial Yaksha had descended. No, because the primordial Azura and the primordial Yaksha both came from the great world where demons rushed into the sky. The two were very similar in appearance. Both were in the form of a human, but his body was huge, his appearance was ferocious, and he had a pair of huge flesh wings on his back. At that time, after confirming that the primordial Azura was not the primordial Yaksha, Yi Xian was still wary of him. Although the primordial Azura was extremely low-key and his temperament was similar to the primordial Yaksha's and he rarely spoke, Yi Xian suspected that he might have some kind of supreme divine ability similar to the primordial Yaksha's fallen sky bow. The fallen sky bow Yi Xian had also mastered the heavenly bow, so he knew how powerful and terrifying it was. Although he was now a powerful existence at the 5th level of the primordial chaos, the primordial Azura was only at the 1st level of this realm. However, if the primordial Azura really had a supreme divine ability similar to the primordial Yaksha's fallen sky bow, then this supreme divine ability would definitely be able to cause harm to the current Yi Xian. This kind of threat was not small, so when Yi Xian rushed to the Azura Forbidden Ground where the primordial Azura was, his vigilance was raised to the extreme. Hiss! With an incomparably crisp sound of ripping cloth, a void crack appeared in the dark void of the Azura Forbidden Ground. A ferocious ape that had shrunk to a height of about 10 feet walked out of it. You're finally here. The forbidden area was completely silent, but there was a figure sitting cross-legged in the air in front of them. It was the primordial Azura, and when he saw Yi Xian arrive, his eyes flashed with a cold light. At the same time, he stood up. His body was 30,000 meters tall, and he had a pair of flesh wings on his back. His body emitted an extremely eerie and mysterious aura. It seems that the news of everything that happened in the Fire Elephant Forbidden Ground and Azure Firmament Starfield has already spread. Why didn't you escape? Seeing this scene, Yi Xian understood in his heart and asked with interest. At the same time, his figure, which was originally only around 3 meters tall, also expanded. In the blink of an eye, he was already 30,000 meters tall, and was the same size as the primordial Azura that was hundreds of millions of kilometers away. This was clearly the rhythm of preparing to engage in close combat. You're really strong. In such a short time, you've already attained the strength of a 5th-order Grandmist. I'm far from being your opponent. Primordial Azura's voice rang out again in a tone that was neither servile nor overbearing. However, I advise you not to engage in this battle. I know you have the Heavensfall bow, but the truth is that I have a similar bloodline ability. Once I use it, I can injure or even kill a 5th-rank primordial monarch. Of course, under your fallen sky bow, I won't be able to escape either. The final result of this battle will definitely be a lose-lose situation. Even if you and I both die, it's really meaningless. What's your relationship with the primordial Yaksha? Hearing the other party's words, Yi Xian's heart skipped a beat, and he asked subconsciously. Hearing this, the primordial Azura was stunned. He looked at Yi Xian with a strange expression, then nodded and continued. His father and I are best friends. Unfortunately, he has already fallen. Since then, the young Yaksha left the Devil Desire Great World. So that's how it is. After understanding all this, Yi Xian nodded again. Of the 13 Grandmist old monsters that have appeared in the left bank in recent years, 8 have already fallen. Apart from you, the remaining 4 will also fall soon. For the sake of the primordial Yaksha, I won't kill you, but you must accompany me in this battle. You and I will not use any divine ability or supreme power. We will only fight with our own cultivation until you are heavily injured. Boom! Rumble. As soon as the words fell, Yi Xian's figure shot out like a meteor, and in the blink of an eye, he was already in front of the primordial Azura. He raised his fist and punched. The latter was still doubtful at first, and hesitation flashed in his eyes, but after seeing that Yi Xian really did not use any divine ability or supreme treasures, he obviously believed it. The shocking bloody battle soon exploded in the void. The qi was too violent and chaotic, and the vast void within a radius of 10 billion miles was completely thrown into chaos. After the time it took to burn an incense stick, everything came to a stop. The blood-stained figure of the primordial Azura fell out of the chaotic void. Although he did not die, he was seriously injured and lost the ability to fight again. Yi Xian did not attack him again. For the sake of the primordial Wuxia, he let the primordial Azura go. There are still 4 prey left. As the primordial Azura's figure appeared, Yi Xian's figure also walked out of the chaotic void. His aura was strong and solid, and he was not injured at all. Eyes with a flash of light, he murmured like he was sleep-talking. Among the 4 grand mist old monsters, the one closest to the Azura Forbidden Land, it's actually the insect that I hate the most. Hiss. With that last sentence, Yi Xian did not hesitate any longer. With a wave of his hand, he tore open a void crack in front of him, and with a shake of his shoulders, he rushed into it and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Look, primordial Azura had a complicated look in his eyes as he watched Qin Lai's departing figure. However, there was also a trace of excitement in the depths of his eyes. So this is the method he used to rapidly promote the transformation of his divine soul and body after entering the primordial chaos. Although he was seriously injured in this battle, he had gained a lot. It would not be long before he could break through and step into the primordial chaos second order. In this way, it could be said that it was a blessing in disguise. This, although the primordial Azura was seriously injured in this battle, he had gained a lot. It would not be long before he could break through and step into the primordial chaos second order. In this way, it could be said that it was a blessing in disguise. But in fact, Yi Xian's gains were even greater. First, although he had killed 8 primordial chaos old monsters in a row before this, he had never fought to his heart's content as he had with the primordial Azura. After this battle, although Yi Xian did not directly promote the transformation of his divine soul and body to the primordial chaos sixth order state after breaking through to the primordial chaos Dao realm, there was only a fine line between it and the primordial chaos sixth order. After leaving the Azura Forbidden Grounds, he did not waste any time and directly went to the next forbidden ground. This supreme forbidden grounds was not too far away from the Azura Forbidden Grounds. The strongest person guarding this place was a primordial chaos space bug race expert. Yi Xian directly rushed over after leaving the Azura Forbidden Grounds. Although the primordial chaos space bug's aura was locked down, it was extremely difficult to deal with. Yi Xian and it fought a bloody battle that lasted for a full incense stick's worth of time before ending. Finally, the primordial chaos space bug was killed, and Yi Xian obtained the majestic blood and energy from the explosion of its body and sent it into the flame pool at the bottom of the volcano in Shenlong's treasured cauldron domain to condense blood essence. Thus, along with the large amount of Heavenly 9 Great Dao Treasure Liquid and Heavenly Dao Origin Liquid, the transformation of his divine soul and body after breaking through to the primordial chaos realm was rapidly pushed forward, and he finally reached the 4th order. When Yi Xian left the Supreme Forbidden Grounds where the primordial chaos space bug resided, he had already displayed the 9 transformations Devil Ape bloodline ability to the 4th order. Under the 4th order, Yi Xian's peak cultivation had reached the primordial chaos 6th order. This was the peak of the mid-stage primordial chaos realm, only 1 order away from the late-stage primordial chaos 7th order. With the fall of the primordial chaos space bug, Yi Xian had killed 9 of the 13 primordial chaos old monsters that had appeared in the Milky Way's left bank in recent years. In addition to primordial Azura, who he had severely injured but had spared, there were 10 primordial chaos old monsters. There were still 3 targets left. According to Yi Xian's estimation, after he killed all 3 primordial chaos old monsters, he would display the 9 transformations Devil Ape bloodline ability to the 5th order. Thus, there was at least an 80% chance that he would possess the late-stage primordial chaos realm cultivation of the 7th order. Roar. Hiss. As all this flashed through his mind, Yi Xian's heart was filled with excitement. He raised his head and let out an earth-shattering roar. Then, without stopping, he waved his hand and tore open a void crack in front of him. His figure flashed and he disappeared. The next 2 stops were all in the Remnant Star region, and the place Yi Xian was heading to was called the Eastern Tai Star region. The one overseeing it was a powerful remnant of the Grand Mist realm, called Patriarch Tai Jiang. Half a day later, in the Eastern Tai Star field. Hiss! With a crisp tearing sound, a void crack appeared in the dark void deep in the star field. A ferocious ape, whose body had shrunk to a height of 10 feet, stepped out of it. Master of the Magic Hall, Yi Xian, you really came. Hiss! 6th Order Primordial Chaos Realm? How is this possible? With the arrival of Yi Xian, the entire Eastern Tai Star field fell silent in an instant. The survivors on the abandoned stars in the star field were all silent, not even daring to breathe. But on the left side of a huge abandoned star, there were 2 soft exclamations. These 2 soft cries clearly emitted an incomparably powerful aura of the Grand Mist realm, causing a dark light to flash within Yi Xian's eyes. He was rather surprised, but he quickly reacted. Among the 3 remaining primordial chaos old monsters, there were 2 remnant chaos old monsters and 1 star beast. Originally, Yi Xian planned to kill Ancestor Tai Jiang in the Eastern Tai Star field before heading to the next remnant star field. But he didn't expect that the remnant chaos old monster guarding the Eastern Tai Star field would actually come here. Moreover, from their conversation just now, it was clear that the 2 of them had already expected Yi Xian's arrival. From this point of view, the reason the 2 of them had gathered together was clearly to get some benefits. Previously, when they were escaping from the vast dark void in front of the left bank, Yi Xian's cultivation was at the 3rd level of the primordial chaos realm, and the 2 of them had supreme trump cards. Although their cultivation was only at the 1st level of the primordial chaos realm, according to their estimates, if the 2 of them joined forces and used all their trump cards, although they still wouldn't be able to do anything to Yi Xian, the Magic Hall Master Yi Xian, similarly, the chances of Yi Xian killing them were not high. Could even be said that there was no chance, however. This deduction was based on the fact that the Magic Hall Master Yi Xian was only at the 3rd level of the primordial chaos realm. Although they had recently received news that the Magic Hall Master, Yi Xian, was wreaking havoc on the left bank, looking for the 10 primordial chaos old monsters that had escaped not long ago, and had already killed several of them. However, in the news that spread, there was no mention of Yi Xian's cultivation at all. Therefore, they didn't know that Yi Xian's cultivation was already at the 6th level of the primordial chaos realm. After all, it had only been less than 10 days since they had escaped. Even if they each possessed an extremely powerful trump card, even if they were to use it with all their might, with their mere cultivation of the 1st level of Grand Mist, facing the 6th level of the Demon Palace, Yi Xian, the 2 of them clearly didn't have the slightest chance of survival. They were destined to be killed and die here. Whoosh! Whoosh! It was precisely because of this that when the 2 old fellows saw Yi Xian arrive and felt the terrifying cultivation aura emitted from his body, and after subconsciously crying out in alarm, they were immediately scared out of their wits. Without any hesitation, they turned around and fled in different directions. It's meaningless, even if you split up and flee. Today, all of you will die. Rumble. Bam! When the 2 old fellows split up and fled, Yi Xian didn't hesitate at all. Following this incomparably cold voice, he directly teleported, and in the blink of an eye, he was already behind the old monster on the left. The old fellow who was trying his best to escape was scared out of his wits, but there was nothing he could do. Before he could react, the incomparably huge fist of the violent ape had already imprinted itself on his back. An explosion rang out in the sky, and the old fellow fell in an instant. His body was completely blown up, and he turned into a bloody mist that spread out. Huff! Before the blood mist formed by the explosion of the old man's body spread out, the violent ape had already waved its hand at the first moment, and the blood mist that was spreading out in the air was quickly swept over by Yi Xian and sent into the central region volcano in the space within the cauldron. At the same time, he also put away a storage magic treasure, which contained the old man's heavenly 9 Great Tao treasure liquid, as well as the heavenly Tao origin liquid and other top-grade cultivation resources.